Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me, as always, is Jared Kozel. I want to apologize off the bat. We're running about 10 minutes late. I was a little sick to my stomach. I know, TMI. But I still wanted to make sure we went live tonight because we're talking about a big one. So I'm excited for it. And I'm feeling better now. So we should be good. Yeah, I hope you're all doing good tonight. How are you doing, Jared?
I'm all right. Busy as ever, if not even more so. But I did manage to carve out some time to not only go make it out to the theater and watch the movie we're going to discuss, Deadpool and Wolverine, but do what I wanted to do last week, which was rewatch a couple of the Fox X-Men films. And I managed to make it through the original X-Men and X2, and I think that's good enough for for our purposes for now.
Yeah,
But very excited.
yeah, those movies are such a part of my DNA that it's always a pleasure to rewatch them. But it's like every single frame of them is stored in my memory bank. Uh, so yeah, I didn't feel the need to do that. I did not get to see this one a second time, which I had hoped to do. Was even considering squeezing it in earlier today, but things just didn't work out. But it's kind of good because I want to try and see it again in IMAX like I did for the first time, because this is quite honestly a gorgeous movie, uh, and seeing it on a subpar screen just doesn't feel like it would be quite the same. Um, but yeah, so we're gonna dive into all the Deadpool and Wolverine goodness, and then uh, I'm gonna talk a little bit about another film that I got to watch in the mid roll. It's quite a veer off the the path, although done by movies done by another director who's pretty famous for comic book films. Um, but sometimes we just need to get some off topic, stuff
Yeah.
out of our system because we're really excited, and so yeah, we'll get into that. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna say it this was probably it was without a doubt like one of my favorite MCU films, just because it was so much fun. And even though I feel conflicted because I feel like there's something holding me back from saying it's one of the best comic book films ever, because last week we talked about Logan, and that's on it's such a different beast. And and so this gets into the whole thing of best versus favorite, because I have no doubt that Deadpool and Wolverine is going to go down as one of my favorite comic book movies ever. And so yeah, I'm not interested in the distinction today too much. All I know is that when I saw this movie, I had the time of my life. I was cheering, I was laughing, I was feeling things, um, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much I could gush about specific things, but we're gonna get into all that. So I'm just gonna say, I'm not interested in dissecting the sort of, what worked better than what else, what was less than perfect, because sometimes you just see a movie and you're like, I don't care, this was fun, and I just want to see it again as quickly as possible. And so yeah, that's my general overview opinion.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I will just say it up front. This is not going to go down as my favorite MCU film or my favorite X-Men film, but the experience I had watching it was an utter and complete delight, and emotionally moving in many respects. because this movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, the Deadpool films have always kind of had their own tone, even within the tonally diverse universe of the Fox X-Men series. They've always kind of stood apart, and that's by design, by the nature of Deadpool as a character. But we always knew that once it became clear that if no one else, Deadpool himself would be making the leap over to the MCU once the Fox films came to the end. And he seemed the appropriate character for that because of his kind of meta fourth wall breaking commentary. You kind of thought like, okay, I can see how this would work. But is anyone else going to come with him? And that was an open question. And for the longest time, when this movie was just Deadpool 3, I was like, I don't really know how this is going to work, but I'm intrigued. And then once it became clear that it would in fact be Deadpool and Wolverine, I was extremely excited to see Hugh Jackman come back as the character and to team up with Deadpool, as had been teased many a time, setting aside, X-Men Origins, where they did share the screen before. But I was also nervous because of exactly what, most people would expect. As we discussed last week, the character of Logan, of Wolverine, came to as played by Hugh Jackman, came to a near perfect end in the 2017 film Logan, and I was wary about the prospect of bringing him back, even when it became clear that he would be a different version, and they would not be undoing the end of Logan in any way. But it became clear that would, this film intended to honor that legacy, even by doing so a little bit tongue-in-cheek. And that's, I think, what set me at ease, because, when we get into the movie's opening scene, they kind of play lovingly with that idea of like, come on, he's got to come back. And then Deadpool, in classic meta fashion, kind of gave the little cheeky line. He was like, I know you know what the title is, so let's just say it. You're wondering how we're going to do this without dishonoring the legacy of Logan. Well, I'll just tell you up front, we're not. And weirdly, that set me more at ease than anything else he could have said.
When he said that, the music cuts out and it cuts to Logan's grave.
Yeah.
At the end of Logan, I always when I find something funny in theater, I crack a smile and I sort of open my mouth wide, and I do like to kind of silent laugh. I'm not one of those people that guffaws, out open, but I'm positive that I laughed out loud when it cut to the grave. I was like, no, they are not. It's like, yes, they absolutely are. And then, just what followed with, with Wade saying, let me tell you, regenerative healing does not work like that. And he's so confident, and then he just starts banging on the body. And then it cuts to skeleton Logan sitting next to him, and he's like, I gotta tell you, you seem pretty dead to me.
Yeah.
I was like, I cannot believe that they're doing, but it was like the absolute perfect Deadpool way to do this. Like they honor Logan by completely disrespecting it right off the top. And and it's like, I was caught between being like horrifyingly insulted, but also delighted beyond belief. It was just brilliant. I mean, I love so much about this movie, but the way it starts is just right off the bat, it lets you know what you're in for.
Oh yeah, it's the best opening of the three Deadpools by a country mile, and because in classic Deadpool fashion, you can take it right up to the red line, then you step over it, and then you just blow light right through it with rocket fuel. And the right up to the line was taking, having him, say, oh, come on, Logan's not going to be dead. We're not going to respect it. And then he steps over it by digging up the grave. and then he blows through it with rocket fuel by using Logan's dismantled adamantium skeleton to murder 50 TVA agents in the most horrifically graphic fashion we've ever seen in an MCU movie. And I'm like, well played. Well played.
But all set to, by the way, what was a really deep cut, which was Ensign's, bye, which is called back to X2.
Yep.
When
just
that song plays in the car, and and everybody in the car is like, oh no. And I actually, before I saw the movie, I saw that on the soundtrack. I was like, oh, I wonder what context that's going to be used in. And I actually thought it would be like later in the movie while they're like driving around in the car or something. I had no idea it would be used in this context with and then the fact that Deadpool then puts on the claws. Oh man, yeah, it's just
I mean the soundtrack choices in this movie were on point. We will talk about more than a few of them, not the least of which is the one that was in the trailer, Madonna's Like a Prayer, which, it being classic Deadpool fashion, you listen to that song and you're like, oh, they chose this song for a reason. There are a lot of double entendres in
here. We'll talk about it, especially as we get closer, the way it was used, and then in different forms, like, was just amazing. Although, of course, as you'd expect, there was probably no way for them to license that song for the soundtrack and for the variations of it that are used. So like it is kind of a sadly a hole in the middle of both the song album and the score soundtrack. But that I kind of expected that. It'll just make those things all the more special when I go back to watch the movie every time and get to experience those. But I just I just love this movie so much. Let's just, I mean, there's too much that happens in this movie to like just go through it in strict chronological order. Like so many joyous things, and we kind of discussed before the stream started. This might not go as long as our normal streams, just because we both only seen the film once, but also because I just want to tackle things as they pop into my head. So, but like a big part of this film is the celebration of the 20th Century Fox era of Marvel films, and even beyond 20th Century Fox.
Which was, we will get there, is one of my absolute favorite parts of this movie.
And like this honestly is what I was kind of waiting for, even though I will say that Spider-Man No Way Home was done in a more sort of respectful manner, but this is Deadpool, so you kind of know what you're in for. But it was as sort of respectful and homage to those films as you could expect a Deadpool film to be. It was definitely a love letter to those movies, and all the way down to the end credits when they rolled all that behind the scenes footage of the X-Men films, the Fantastic Four, all that stuff. It just I felt seen by both that and just the whole movie, because while since 2008 a lot of Marvel and movie fans have been like just singing the praises of the MCU and celebrating, like I've was always kind of being like the disgruntled 20th Century Fox Marvel fan in the corner, being like, yeah, but I prefer the X-Men, you know, and then when Disney bought Fox, I was like, well, shit, that means you know, my little Marvel franchise that I hold dear isn't going to be there anymore. And so I was really kind of waiting for Marvel Studios to kind of tip their hat in a big way to those of us who were big, huge fans of those movies. And we've gotten a little bit of that with, you know, Professor X shows up in Doctor Strange, although maybe not used in completely in the fashion that I would have preferred. But that we got Beast in the post-credit scene of the Marvels, which just, you know, made me so happy. And with the promise of more to come with that. And but this was really like finally a full serving of like, we're directly, you know, referencing these movies, and you know, and we're celebrating not just the big success of, you know, the X-Men franchise, but also we're tipping our hat to the stuff that maybe wasn't as acclaimed, and you know, and maybe had some stumbles, but they were still an important part of like the legacy of Marvel, and the things that made me a fan. Like you know, I was definitely a fan of even though they weren't like the best comic book films in the world, I did enjoy those original you know, Fantastic Four movies. I was even a fan of the director's cut of Daredevil, which I thought, you know, was really good. And you know, and it's just like and then the other guy that shows up that we'll talk about, like, that wasn't Fox, but like that was like the first big Marvel, you know, character to get, you know, not counting Howard the Duck. That would have been crazy.
He's already appeared.
But if they had called back to that other Howard the Duck in this, that would have been crazy. But I think they had enough crazy going on in this movie. But like, it really made me so happy, you know, and it just had my heart set ablaze for the entire movie. And so I really do want to thank Marvel Studios, you know, thank, you know, Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, you know, Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Sean Levy, you know, all the people involved in this. They just, you know, they answer my prayers, and there's the promise of still some stuff to come. You know, I actually don't feel like this is quite the end of the homage to that era of Marvel movies, because you know, it's all building towards a collision of different realities. And so, yeah, I think we're going to be getting a little bit more. I expect, like, I do kind of like, I don't want to get my hopes up, but I do expect a lot of fan service in those Avengers films. And so we'll see what's to come. But where was I going with all that? Oh yeah, just talking about, like, you know, people crap on fan service, but like, you know what? I say screw that. If you couldn't get excited about everything that was in these movies, and a lot of people, to be fair, a lot of people seems like they were very excited. But I just say that, you know, you have a cold heart. Try being a romantic, you know, because this just was, you know, like I said before, a beautiful love letter. So, I loved it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, playing into that history and playing into what fans loved about these characters and loved about these stories. You know, fan service, like so many terms in the today's hellish online discourse, has been corrupted by people who are like a little tired of these movies being a cultural hegemony, and you know, some bad faith actors, basically to mean fan service means empty calories for people who aren't interested in real art. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know, so the people who are passionate about these movies and these stories love these characters, love these stories, and having them appear on screen and be honored in this way is not a case of them just chewing on empty calories. It's honoring, in fact, the legacy of everything that came before and everything that could still be. You know, it's notable that, like, you know, Kevin Feige, the studio head of the MCU, the kind of the creative oversight, you know, you know, the MCU is kind of his baby in many ways, but he didn't start, you know, at the top of the food chain. He got his start and then, you know, as an associate producer. He was a producer on the very first X-Men film, and X2, and The Last Stand, and many others besides that. He loves these characters, you know, every bit as much as, you know, the next Marvel fan. And the reason that they haven't appeared before then, and the reason the MCU wasn't based on them, is just it was a simple economic reality. The X-Men, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, a couple other properties like Blade and, you know, Daredevil, they were Marvel's most popular characters. So before Marvel had its own studio apparatus, they sold those rights off, and, you know, and to other studios to make those movies. They still had a creative hand in them, but they didn't actually, you know, they weren't their own characters. And the characters who were left over, the Avengers, you know, were not the top line characters. It's been a triumph of imagination and, you know, the creative vision that they've managed to build those characters up into characters that people also love. But it was never meant to come at the expense of the X-Men or, you know, any of the other characters. It's just the reality of what it takes to make big studio movies like this.
Yeah,
but now that it's come back, you know, these like, you were wondering, like, well, are they just going to be like, well, we have our characters back, so now we're going to do our own thing? That's kind of what I thought. I thought we were going to get a new Wolverine, a new Cyclops, a new Jean Grey, a new Storm, like right off the bat. But I think they were smarter than that. They recognized that people need an opportunity to ease into this new, brave new world and to say goodbye, you know, in a better fashion than, you know, just reading about in the trades that the studio had been sold and now we don't get these characters anymore. And the way they found to do that has been actually very thoughtful and well done.
Which I have to give them a lot of credit for, because in my sort of bitterness, I expected less from Marvel Studios in that regard. I did expect them to just right off the bat wipe the slate clean, and we're starting over, and that other stuff, it didn't exist, you know. And you know, I think there was, you know, I don't know if it was just great, you know, planning ahead or just serendipitous great timing that they were tackling the multiverse when, you know, the Disney sale happened, and they were like, and they just took advantage of it. You know, either way, if they were looking ahead, props to them. If they just took advantage of what was in front of them, still props. Because it just provided such a great way. Like this, the sort of reevaluation of my expectations from Marvel started with when they did Spider-Man No Way From Home. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect this, especially after they'd already introduced, you know, and established their new Spider-Man, to then go back and pay tribute to what had come before. And like, not just like go back to Tobey Maguire, who was like the established, you know, popular Spider-Man, but also to honor Andrew Garfield, who, to be honest, got the short end of the stick. You know, I still maintain that I'm a big fan of the first Amazing Spider-Man. I actually think that's a really entertaining film. I think he's fantastic. I think there were some things working against the second film, you know, which was not necessarily, you know, it certainly wasn't his fault, you know, and so, and even so, I remember enjoying it. It wasn't perfect, but I still had a good time at the theater, and so to see him get honored, you know, with that film as well, and who knows, we might see them yet again. Uh, but and if we don't, it's fine because I feel like that film really honored both of them, and not only them, but the villains from their respective movies. Um, you know, and the fact that, you know, this is off topic. We're supposed to be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, but I feel like it's also on topic as well. You know, as nuts as I went for what we got with, you know, with all the returning actors, I was like, holy shit, you made Willem Dafoe like a linchpin in the identity of Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Like, that's not just tipping your hat to what came before. That's saying we're integrating these stories. These characters matter not just in the legacy of Marvel, but in the fabric of the MCU, the fabric of these stories that we are now creating. And I feel like now they're doing that with the X-Men as well, you know, and it just, yeah, I'm so beyond grateful for that. And it just, you know, it puts like, not that they need it from me, but it does put Marvel Studios in sort of you know, in my good graces, so to speak. Like, whereas I used to feel more antagonistic towards them because they were like the competition to my preferred films, but now I'm like, no, like, they love this stuff just like I do, you know. And so, yeah, I just, absolute props to them, and I love what they're doing, and you know, I still don't love every single like property that they do, because I have like preferred Marvel characters over others, but it's like, now I get it because I see this movie, and like, does it have the most like sophisticated plot? Maybe not, you know, but like, something that I might criticize for another Marvel movie where I'm not as invested in the characters, but then I look at like other fans who are going crazy over it, whereas before I might have been like, I don't quite get that. Now, like, seeing a film that was so focused on, you know, like, not just Deadpool but Wolverine and the legacy of the X-Men and stuff, so I can say, okay, this isn't a movie that necessarily is going to go on to win awards, but like, I get what they're doing, and I'm like, I just, and I had the time of my life, and so it allows me to let my guard down. I'm like, okay, I'll let you guys cook.
Yeah, it's the best kind of creative collaboration, and, you know, honoring in the classic, most basic spirit of, like, you know, improv. Yes, and not no, but not,
Yeah.
not like now we have these characters and everything that came before didn't matter. You know, sweep it off to the side. It's done. What, like, this new thing now? That's what I think a lot of people fear. What they've done is they've said, yes, all those stories came before, even the ones that weren't as quite creatively successful. Yes, they mattered. Yes, they happened. And we're going to acknowledge that, not just with like an Easter egg nod in, you know, that doesn't really affect the main narrative. We're going to actually integrate it into the larger story that we've been telling over the course of the past now 34 movies. You know, we can now say, like, that all the X-Men films that we watched, the 13 Fox films, the 2 Fantastic Four films, the 2, the Daredevil and Elektra, the 3 Blade movies, like they all happened in the larger Marvel universe. And even though like the idea that we're playing with the idea that the MCU that we've been watching for the past, since 2008 is quote unquote the sacred timeline, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like, well, these are the only stories that matter. It means that this is kind of forming the narrative spine by which we're going to connect everything else. And we're going to bring in these characters in a way that will, let fans know, hey, we see you. We know how much these characters meant to you, and we're going to honor them where we can. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to come back, but it does mean that all those characters that you had an emotional attachment to, we recognize that those stories had value and that they still like happened. And that's really what fans want. Fans want to know like what the stories that we're watching actually matter, not only on screen, but in the larger world, and it's not just, a corporate product that's being put out. Now, it is that's inarguable, but I think where the disconnect comes is that some people get so cynical about these kinds of things that they think that's all that the studio heads care about. And there are some empty suits that's all they do care about. It's pretty clear Kevin Feige's not one of those people.
Yeah, it's like I read an article about this movie, and I try to stay away from this stuff, but like sometimes my, it's like a massive pile up. You just can't look away sometimes. And the article was about Deadpool and Wolverine isn't just a bad movie. It's it paints a horrifying picture of the future of movies, and it talked about like how it's a complete corporate product, and and like even as it's poking fun at everything, but it's still like but it's still a product of like cynicism and all that. And like, but I approach that, I'm like, okay, I get that there are like suits involved, in the production of these movies, and from the studios and all that, but who's actually making the movies? And if you want to point to the studio head that's actually involved in the production of the films, that's Kevin Feige. Does anybody think that Kevin Feige doesn't absolutely adore and love Marvel Comics and the stories of Marvel Comics and the characters of Marvel Comics? If you do, you're an idiot. Like, I haven't loved everything that that Marvel Studios has done, but never once have I said Kevin Feige is just a suit who doesn't care about this shit. No, this is a man who loves this stuff dearly, and he's in charge of getting all of it created. Like, whatever my quibbles about some, Marvel films, like, and I've been guilty in the past of saying that they do kind of feel like, a little homogenous, but again, that was coming from such a, like, I was sort of guilty of being overcome by cynicism, but it wasn't strictly about like, well, Kevin Feige is just a suit and he doesn't care. That was never the thing. It was more to do with with the sort of idea for creating a universe, and that it didn't allow for, for different sort of more unique visions. But that's not what this is intended to be. And the more that I've learned about the background of Marvel Comics, the more I've actually come to respect that. Because I did not know the degree to which Marvel Comics were built as an integrated universe, and how much they have tried to stick to that throughout its entire existence. I came to realize the extent of that a couple of years ago. I was reading a book. I forget what it was. I think it was All the Marvels or something, which sort of detailed the history of the comics. I'm like, holy shit! Like, there was a lot that went into making this like one big, huge, cohesive universe, and the movies and this, you know, film franchise is trying to do the same thing, and it's honoring that. And so I deeply regret like being as cynical and sort of snippy about all that as I was. It may not always be to my taste, but like I can't ignore that this is an artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like I no longer subscribe to the idea that this is sort of like a cynical product, or that the movies are just advertising the next movie to come along. Like they have been trying to do something very unique, and and this all comes from a man who loves these stories. So like, I don't know, if you don't like them, you know, that's fine. But it's to sort of just dismiss them as a cynical corporate product is, you know, at best disingenuous.
Yeah, and there's often an agenda to it because there are people who, as we alluded to, kind of resent the fact that comic book movies and IP, a term that I hate, but I'll use it here, stories, including other things that we love, like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and, you know, DC comics, and, you know, have really become like the dominant cultural movies. And in the past year or two, when Marvel has kind of been struggling and some of their films have not been doing so well, I've seen, you know, articles from people who consider themselves more serious consumers of cinema, almost like champing at the bit, eager to see like maybe this means that the era of comic book movies is about to end. And I never believed that, because I'm like, something's eventually going to come along that will reignite that phrase.
And then look at this,
the past weekend. The box office makes it clear that there is still an appetite for this kind of stuff. And one of the articles that I read about that was almost despairing about the fact that it was like, oh, we almost killed the comic book movie, but now it's coming back. God damn it. And I'm like, if that's the way that you think, then frankly, it's a sad, miserable existence. And I really don't care about your opinion about these movies. What I do care about is people who want these stories to constantly feel fresh and new. And frankly, comics are a perfect venue for that, because they are constantly about reinvention. You know, that the entire idea of a comic book superhero movie is that there's a character, they have certain set points and archetypes that don't change for the most part. But other than that, you can tell almost any story that you want with them. You know, you can tell a story about the X-Men in, one era, and then you can tell them, I mean, like a retro-futuristic setting, or you can reimagine them as like medieval knights or whatever it is you want to do. But you still recognize the character, because you just have to know that like these characters are like, they're designed to be like kind of constants in that way, and the story flows through them. And I personally have found that like, that's why these characters keep, you know, reliving it on in the imagination, is because there will always be somebody who looks up to these movies, to these characters, and say, like, I love this character, I want to tell my story, you know, through their eyes. And that's the idea. That's the bet. And it's harder to do that when you're stuck beholden to things like canon and an ongoing story, but it is possible. You know, this movie is an example of how to do that, you know. And it doesn't mean that it's, again, I've always pushed back on the idea that people view these movies as cynical corporate products. Again, not because they aren't made by corporations, but because the artists who make them, the actors, the writers, the directors, you know, the producers, the costumers, the production designers, they are approaching this as art. And you may not like their vision, but they are artists, and their work deserves to be respected as such, not viewed as, you know, as corporate shows.
Yeah, and like, and the whole thing about like, you know, corporate products, like, okay, yeah, there's independent movies that sort of originate The studios sort of get involved later because the up and coming artists are like you have an idea and they get it going, and yeah, there's that, but there's also studio movies, which like there are a lot of beloved and acclaimed studio films that have filmmakers at the root of them who have a strong artistic vision, and they're acclaimed, and there's a lot of people who would call many of those films art, but guess what, they're still financed, and their production started up thanks to corporations. Like, it's called the movie business. Business is a part of it. We hope for the art to shine through, but but business is inarguably, connected to it. You can't get away from that. And so, yeah, like I said before, it's easy to get cynical. I was guilty of that myself. But guess what? A lot, and a lot of that has to do with, sort of why I've been avoiding social media a lot lately, because it's very easy to become cynical when you're exposed to, cynical thoughts, every second of every day. It's, that sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but it is nice to get away from it all, and you can actually start thinking for yourself again. So, just food for thought. I want to like mention, one other thing before, because I do want to dive back into the film itself. Although now I think I've just blanked out on what I was going to say because I went down a different path. Maybe it'll come back to me, but yeah. So anyway, talking about the film itself, I do want to kind of give a general notion of, like, after we get the intro with Deadpool digging up Logan's grave, I do want to sort of set the stage for where Wade is at in this film. He's kind of, it goes back to, cuts back to a bit earlier, and he's going through a bit of a rough patch in this movie. He's sort of searching for something, he's not quite sure what. Things have kind of gone south with Vanessa, but that, like, the interesting thing about that was that I found that, like, it had less to do with Vanessa herself, and like it was the fact that he was in a bad place, and she kind of needed to step away while he was dealing with all that. And he thinks that and this is like the first great example of, like, of, like, well, not the first great example, because we get the whole thing with him at Logan's grave, but like him, like going into the sacred timeline, which, by the way, it's still called the sacred timeline when he goes to it, because at that time, that's before all the stuff happens in Loki. But the fact, I was confused because I was like, wait, they're not just making it so that, he was always in the Marvel universe, are they? No, it's like, he's not like jumping from like one reality to another. He's just jumping movie franchises. And that's the whole, like, that was one of the conceits of this movie that, and really the whole trilogy that I absolutely adore, is that, like, Wade's universe, the X-Men, Fox, Marvel universe, at least within the confines of the Deadpool films, is less of an actual, like, reality in terms of, like, the rest of the Marvel story. It's, this universe is literally a movie franchise. And so it's like, you view it through those terms, and like I was like, are they going to make sense of, like, all the the different time periods and the continuity. No, like this universe is everything from all those films. It's the whole glorious, messy Fox universe, and it's like that's great. I love it. And so to try and solve his problems, he jumps over to to Disney World and tries to get a job as an Avenger. And I just like, it's always great just, seeing why am I drawing a blank on his
Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau, yeah. Just this was a great, this was a great cameo, and I love the whole stuff. Should I save this? I feel like I should save this if the man's going to show. He doesn't do this anymore. What cameos? Meetings. No, it was just fun, and it shows like he is. He's searching for that bigger thing. I think it's interesting that he's looking for something bigger, a sort of sense of belonging, like until the thing that really means something to him is threatened. And then he realizes, oh no, I don't really need all that other stuff. What's important to me is right here. It's the people that I love, and so I really like that, and and of course, Happy's just like, maybe you're aiming too high, maybe aim for the middle.
Yeah, no, I thought that this scene was very smartly done because it does play with the metatextual narrative that, Deadpool was trying now to jump into the MCU, which is going to be the sacred timeline going forward. But it also, works because they keep it grounded in Deadpool's or Wade's, overall emotional state as well, because he does, as repeated as a refrain out throughout this movie. He says, like, I know I turn everything into a joke, but I actually do care. I actually do want to do something that matters. And he does have emotional anchors and touchstones, the 9 people who form up his entire world in that picture, central of which is Vanessa, his girlfriend, the love of his life, as played by the wonderful Morena Baccarin, who I am always happy to see return. And I think that their relationship in the first Deadpool movie, which I really do love, was such an authentic and fun and relationship that really kind of formed the spine of why this character worked in this iteration. It was ultimately like a love story in that movie. And I think, I'll be honest, I don't love Deadpool 2 nearly as much as I love the first one. And one of the reasons for it is the central conceit of that movie is Vanessa gets killed off in the first, 10 minutes, and Deadpool spends most of the movie trying to find new purpose. And then he brings her back at the end. And I kind of found that to be not the direction I would have preferred the story to go. But that's why it was so interesting when she does return. We see that the events of that movie did have an impact because Vanessa remembers what happened, and she knows that we can't just keep doing this. We need to you need to find something else other that doesn't involve around, frankly, death. Something that means more. And Wade struggles to find that. That's why he goes and tries to join the Avengers, because he's basically I need this. Not, I think it could be of service to the people, but I need this so I can have purpose, so I can impress her. And Happy rightly calls him out on it. He's like, the Avengers don't do this job because they need it. They do it because the world needs them. And that is ultimately the lesson that Wade will learn, over the course of this movie. And it's the reason that despite being separated from Vanessa in the beginning, there's still love there. And it's why at the end, their reconciliation feels so earned.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the only like if I have a negative about the movie, it's just that, and it's just because of the nature of the story. Like, yeah, but I hope in the future we get more Vanessa, because she's such a great character. And yeah, I wasn't crazy about sort of what they do with her in part two. I actually love part two just because of a lot of the other stuff, but I wasn't crazy about that. But then the thing that kind of makes it work for me is the fact that he does go back in time and save her at the end, which, by the way, there's a great line in this movie where when Matthew McFadden is oh god, I forget the exact wording, but basically, oh, and you've done some you've done some shit to your timeline. Yeah, it's so yeah, but no, as far as Deadpool 2 goes, I love a lot of the supporting characters, and any the fact that it's got Cable, and any Marvel story that brings Cable in, I'm like, hell yeah. Although I will call Ryan Reynolds out, because in the post-credit sequence of Deadpool 1, he did tease us with the possibility of Keira Knightley playing Cable, and he did not deliver on that. So, damn you, Ryan Reynolds. But yeah. So yeah, he's wanting to get into the the MCU for the wrong reason. So he kind of he hangs up his Deadpool uniform, and what is he doing? Is he a delivery guy, or
he's a used car salesman with Rob Delaney's Peter.
That's right. I wanted to mention Peter because he is seriously one of my favorite parts of this movie. He's just so great. He's just an ordinary guy, he is such a delight. And of course, and then we find out by the end of the movie that every Deadpool has a Peter, which is great.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like they're really close buddies, and Peter's trying to get him back into doing some Deadpool stuff, which is hilarious because that would not work out well for him. He needs to stay on the sidelines, poor guy, because of course in Deadpool 2 he gets killed before Wade goes back to save him. But no, he's a good guy. He brings Wade home for the surprise party, and and I just love the fact that and there's a line where Wade says it's been a while, but I care about you guys all so much, and that struck a chord with me because it feels like he's the one distancing himself. Yeah. Because these people all clearly love and care about him, and it kind of reminded me a bit like when I'm going through some stuff, I'll be like, God, it's been a while since I hung out with my friends, and then everybody we know will be doing weekly, chats on the Zoom, and stuff, and it's well, if you actually made a point to be part of that, then it wouldn't be a while since you were talking. But when you sort of are down on yourself and you're going through some things, it's sort of like a self-imposed exile, and I feel that's what Wade is kind of doing to himself. And but these people clearly all love him, and of course the party is where we get that wonderful exchange with Al. You want to do the part that was in the trailer? You want to do some cocaine? Shut. Cocaine is the one thing that Feige said is off limits. It's just absolutely wonderful. I love that they made time for these characters who were so integral to the first two movies, who kind of take a little bit of a backseat in this movie, just sort of by necessity because of the story, but it's showing that like they are at the heart of why Wade does what he does in this film. And so I like that even though they're not in it quite as much, they are like central to the film.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and in particular, a character like Al, who has always been just a central touchstone for comedic relief, throughout these movies. Her relationship with Deadpool is very, antagonistic, even though there's obviously affection there. And we knew that, like, for instance, like the conceit of having like the old blind roommate who is not only like, addicted to cocaine, but like this is her great, passion in life. I always think back to the first movie when, they're doing the fourth wall break inside the fourth wall break, and she's just like, God, I miss cocaine. And you're like, this woman is not interested in rehab. She's like, I'm 90 years old, and the devil's dandruff is my passion, and we are going to. Yes, I do want to build a snowman. Which is the kind of thing that, like, yes, you were expecting, like when Deadpool made the jump into the MCU, you were like, okay, that's going to be the first thing to go. And I love that they managed to bring that back and acknowledge it with this scene that, as you mentioned, was in the trailer. Every bit as funny in the movie itself as it was then. But then there are also characters, who, like, ultimately are a little bit more just there because they've been in the previous movies, like Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her girlfriend Yukio, who I do love that Deadpool still has that dynamic with Yukio, where they just like each other, even though Negasonic even though Negasonic Teenage Warhead has always been like a little bit on top of Deadpool's crap, and then Colossus is there, and Dopinder, and and a couple of others who, had showed up in Deadpool 2, fucking Shatterstar. But ultimately, it really is about Vanessa. Vanessa is the touchstone for Wade in this movie. And the fact that they are estranged at the beginning of the movie, and it's so important, as you said, that it's really because of Deadpool's emotional, barriers. Because Vanessa, even though, she's taken a step away from him, she clearly still loves him. She has come to the, the birthday party, and they have that absolutely pivotal scene later in the flashback where we see that Vanessa is trying to help Wade as he's lost, and she doesn't want to step away from him. Wade is the one who literally puts those words in her mouth when he says, "Just say you don't want to be with me." She never says that. And when Cassandra Nova is fucking with Deadpool's mind, literally finger fucking his mind, she is, she puts those words in Vanessa's mouth of the idea that you will never matter. And that is the thing that actually snaps her control of the illusion, because as Wade rightly says, she would never say that. Yeah, and it's because Vanessa never stopped believing in Wade. It's Wade stopped believing in himself, and he has to recognize that, much as Wolverine stopped believing in himself. And these two broken people managed to heal each other in over the course of this movie.
Oh, God. So the we got the party, but then the TVA shows up. Which is so great. And again, we get like, another bit that we got from the trailer where it's like, whoa. Is that supposed to be scary? Petting isn't new for me, friendo, but it is for Disney. Which, by the way, I love the inclusion of friendo. It's such a great, callback to No Country for Old Men, which is like the last thing you'd expect to be referenced. But I love it. And they capture him. He's taken to the TVA, and we are treated to the utterly brilliant Matthew McFadden as Mr. Paradox. Which, side note, he may not think he was dishy enough for Pride and Prejudice, but he was.
The precedent interview where he was talking about Pride and Prejudice, I'm like, dude, do you realize how much people adore that movie? current company included. He's like,
Yeah.
you need to broaden your horizons a little bit more.
Yeah.
But obviously, like Matthew McFadden has come up in the world from the time when he was a relative unknown in 2005. He always had a place in our hearts alongside our dear Kira because of that movie. But now he had his big breakout role on Succession, and like that is probably what landed him this role. And he definitely is playing more of a Succession-like character than a Mr. Darcy character here. He ultimately is kind of a little weasel. But he does have that kind of commanding, presence in the initial scene that makes you realize that, like, okay, this is the type of character who can bridge the timelines. The TVA was always going to be like, as from the moment it was introduced in Loki, it was always going to be the most efficient way to bridge these gaps because they are kind of the overseer of the universe. And when we meet Mr. Paradox, you're like, okay, yeah, no, I mean, he is here as like our kind of central authority figure, the police captain for Deadpool to rebel against. And then they quickly undercut that, realizing, oh no, he's actually like kind of running an off-book operation here, and he really is kind of a selfish git, isn't he? But
which is great. I love that wasn't really spoiled. Because I didn't really think about it in the trailers, like how things kind of unfold plot wise. But I love the fact that he turns out to be kind of revealed as the villain, as well, one of the villains, of the film. And yeah, no, I thought he was delightful. There's a bit at the end where he just goes, and sorry, like this is just me adult language ridden stream, but at the end where he's very calm and then he goes, fuck. It's just so great. It's delightful, and he gives Wade the whole pitch. It's like, this is your chance, Wade, to be a hero among heroes. And then we did, the reel of all the Avengers stuff, and then there's the bit where we see Thor holding, a dying Deadpool, and it's like, whoa, why is Thor crying? Oh wait, no, that hasn't happened yet. So great. And and then all the stuff we saw in the trailer, which was no less entertaining, seen in the actual movie. I'm the Messiah, I am Marvel Jesus, which again, like, okay, I don't subscribe necessarily to the whole that Marvel has sort of gone downhill the last couple of years, because I actually think they've gotten a bit ballsier with some of their projects. But still, it was fun to have Deadpool kind of, poking fun at the whole thing of, the discussion around that. And there's a line later on it says to Wolverine, welcome to the MCU, you're coming in at kind of a low point, which is hilarious since he just entered it as well. But yeah, it's and then of course it all turns, he gets his new uniform, but then it all turns when he finds out that his universe is going to be destroyed, not in keeping with the TVA's plans. It's actually going to slowly dwindle out of existence because of a little something we'll talk about in a second. But Paradox is, he's basically Agent Smith from the Matrix saying, I have to get out of here. And so he wants to hurry the process along. And so he's just going to, zap the whole thing out of existence. And Wade is not on board with that. The reason why the reality is slowly dwindling out of existence is because it's lost its anchor, which is a new concept introduced. And there's a moment where he's like, well, hey, still alive. And Paradox just starts laughing out loud, and he's like, oh no, it's not you. Can you imagine? We find out that it was, of course, Logan.
Yeah. And I did enjoy, I mean, the whole concept of an anchor being, I'm like, I have some questions, but I also don't really care, because it is more of a meta commentary on the fact that, yes, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine was, as we discussed, in many ways the anchor for the Fox X-Men films. And, he did have a brilliant, and moving end. And I did love that they, they make sure they play the ending of Logan on the TV, and everyone is standing there just like, oh. It's so powerful. It's so moving. And
he's like, Logan, are you kidding me?
But yeah, it's it was, again, it was a way for them to acknowledge what we had talked about up front. The events of Logan happened. That version of Wolverine that was incredibly consequential and mattered, and his death mattered, and his death sticks. And they do hold true to that, and that sacrifice, particularly in the later dynamics that we'll get into. But they also, being the Deadpool franchise, and bringing all these timelines together, they poke fun at it too. The idea that, like, we'll get into it later, but Deadpool jokes around, like, when he's talking about Wolverine to somebody else, he's like, yeah, Disney brought him back. They're going to make him do this till he's 90. I'm like, harsh but true.
There's also a line where is like, somebody something about, like, can we just end all this? And he's like, Mangold tried.
Mangold tried, yeah.
Oh, God. But that's what I mean. Like, I love the fact that it distilled everything, like, about this particular universe into, like, it's a movie franchise, not a universe that abides by, like, the normal laws of time and whatnot. Yeah. So, like, it doesn't matter that Logan took place, in whatever year, like, Wade's aware of all of it because it was a movie in the series. And so, like, and so it's just really fun to, like, say that, to look back on, like, no, all the messiness associated with some of the Fox movies, it's like, no, it's all just part of that universe.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun. Yeah, and so, Wade initially, pretends to go along with it, and he's like, nope, I'm actually gonna go grab a Wolverine and stop all this, which he thinks he can just trade one for the other. Not quite not quite how it works, but he's a man on a mission, and we get treated to just an absolutely hysterical, wonderful montage sequence of meeting all these different Wolverines, including a comic accurate sized Wolverine.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed everything about this. Getting the short Hugh Jackman Wolverine, Old Man Logan, Age of Apocalypse Wolverine, the
Patches.
Cavalry.
And the Cavalry being the topper to all of it, because from the moment that people, again, metatextual, from the moment it was clear that the X-Men would be joining the MCU, people were like, well, they're going to need a new Wolverine. Who could it be? Henry Cavill. And he was done so dirty by DC. Let's bring him in. And, they bring that directly in when he's like, oh, my God, the Cavalry, you're real. And may I say, that just feels right. We will treat you so much better than those shit fucks down the street. Which, again, is harsh. I do love Henry Cavill as Superman. I'm sorry that he won't be continuing in that role. But it was fun that they acknowledged that, much in the same way that they had done in Multiverse of Madness, when people were like, who should be Mr. Fantastic? John Krasinski. And then they bring him in, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's here!" And now he's very much not here.
Which, by the way, now there's the running joke of like how they bring in members of that bringing in members of the Fantastic Four and these other realities just to obliterate them, in the most nonchalant ways possible.
which I will point out. Like, on the one hand, I am still waiting for my Jessica Alba as Sue Storm to come back as someone who was let's just lightly say enamored with Jessica Alba very much at that age. But on the other hand, if you're gonna do her like you did poor Johnny, then maybe hold on.
No, like I want her to, like they're going to be still dealing with the multiverse and all this stuff, like in the Avengers films coming up. I say bring her in and let her kick ass. Come on, it's she'd be game for it. No, I right there with you. Was she perfectly cast as Sue Storm? Not sure, but that era me, and if we're honest, even this era me just did not care.
I watched Into the Blue, a good few fair times, and it was definitely, for the story, and
I've seen Honey, so that should show the lengths that I went for just Alba. I am really still waiting for a Blu-ray release of Dark Angel. Like that, I will jump on that. It's bring her back. I think that would be a lot of fun. Just don't dismember her. But yeah, so the whole sequence going through all these different Wolverines was a lot of fun, and then we get to he arrives in the bar, we recognize her from the trailer, we're like, this is going to be our Wolverine. Turns out, according to Mr. Paradox, the worst Wolverine of them all, though I don't think he's the best judge necessarily. So yeah. But no, and their exchange is great. It's exactly the dynamic like we've been waiting for between these two guys. Just like we know it's going to turn into a bromance, but we also were looking forward to the antagonism. And this was just great. I just love how grumpy Wolverine is right off the bat, and and it's obvious that as he says, everybody knows who I am. I'm the Wolverine, and you can tell he's been through it. We don't quite know how yet, but yeah, it's. This is a Logan worthy of the some of the shit he's gone through, and the stuff that the other Wolverine went through, and it's just this scene just kind of introduced us to like the fact that this is a Deadpool movie, so it was going to be irreverent and all that stuff, but that Hugh Jackman was still going to bring a lot of emotional gravitas to the movie.
Yeah, and it's well known that like Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are close friends off screen. They had always kind of teased this. The first two Deadpool movies made a lot of references to the Wolverine character, even though he didn't actually appear outside of the post-credit scene in Deadpool 2. But bringing them together on screen like this, they were always going to have to find a dynamic that would be worthy of, again, having Hugh Jackman, after having retired the character in Logan, a story kernel that was worth it, and bringing him in as a Wolverine who is effectively even more down on his luck than we've ever seen him before, because not only is he completely alone, not only did he let down his entire world, as Mr. Paradox says, but also he, like, he mirrors Deadpool's, own struggle here. He is someone who, like, Deadpool is searching. Deadpool wants to matter. Deadpool wanted to do something, worthy of his, his family and his world, and he has been searching for that. And that this Wolverine had that opportunity, but he effectively, in many ways, squandered it because, as he later mentions, to a certain character who appears, he says, I couldn't have them thinking I wanted to be there. And that is very much Deadpool's attitude as well. Like, he disguises everything with a joke, but ultimately, as he says, I do care. And this Wolverine cares very, very much. He would not be in such a miserable place if he didn't care. It's because he couldn't show how much he cared until it was too late. And now he just thinks that he has lost that opportunity forever. So what's the point? But for the moment we see that, he has, when Deadpool kind of, gets what's the phrase he says that, like, it was an educated wish that he could save his world. We see that this Wolverine actually does latch onto that, because deep down he craves that redemption. And he finds it in an unexpected form, as we know. But right now, he is a mess.
And this was a brilliant way to also introduce the concept of, like, why this Wolverine would actually wear a costume, because the fact that, that they wanted him to wear the costume, he was urged by, Scott, by Jean, by Storm to actually suit up, and we can see that the X-Men had more colorful costumes in that particular universe, and he never did, which is fitting with what we know of the other Wolverine, which is that it was tough enough getting him to suit up in the black leather. He never would have, wanted to put on, the yellow and blue. And so the only thing that actually gets him to do that is just because of what happened, and the fact that, in his mind, he let them all down. And so he'll honor them by always wearing it, like, even underneath his, his regular clothes. And like that's like, it was a really smart way to actually say that this is why he's wearing, the actual costume. And the fact that by the end of the movie, he will be wearing it proudly. And yeah, it's just, I thought that was done absolutely perfectly. And oh my God, like, let's just talk about the pleasure of seeing, Wolverine in the costume, just everything as it should be, and there's another surprise to come at the end of the movie, which we'll talk to when we get to that moment. But just seeing this, like, talk about a lifelong dream of of seeing this, ever since, the first X-Men, and, like, kind of accepting that, it's just not something that was going to happen, but then, the journey we've been on, with comic book movies since then. And, and when I saw that first picture that they released, the two of them walking side by side and Hugh Jackman in the costume, I was like, man, I can't believe we're actually here. And it's just so much fun, just like, and their fight, and then just all the stuff throughout the movie, and it's just, let's fucking go. It's so much fun. I mean, how about you? Were you just delighted seeing that?
I mean, I was, because I knew that, like, when they were going to bring this Wolverine in, and they were going to have him be a different version of the Wolverine than we had known in the previous movies. I'm like, this is kind of an opportunity to, have a little bit of a fresh reset with the character. I was never a person who was like, I must have the yellow suit. I understood why they didn't, do it, especially back in 2000, when they made the joke about the fact that, like, what were we expecting? Yellow spandex? They were trying to get a little bit more established at that time. But like now we've had 24 years since that movie. And, as Deadpool said, let's give the people what they want. And so this
I feel like I always feel like once they went all in with like Loki and his big horns, like anything was possible after that. So so I felt like whenever we got Wolverine in the MCU, whether it was Hugh Jackman or not, like they were gonna go for it. But then of course Logan happened, and it's like, okay, well he's done, and we'll just get somebody new as the character, and then we'll get the costume. But then he comes back in this fashion, and to actually see him don the yellow, it's just I never needed it, but there is like a part of me that boyhood fantasy of like, I grew up watching X-Men the animated series, and it's like, and that costume is part of what makes Wolverine. And so I had just always kind of separated the two in my mind, but it just felt so gratifying to see, those two sides of the Wolverine character, come together. And I was so delighted.
And again, I as you said, I love that they came up with a story reason for it, as opposed to just like this Wolverine wears yellow, and not just because, as Deadpool alludes to, it's like, I wear red so they can't see me bleed, but I can see how yellow would be useful too. And you're like, I get what you're saying there, but no, there's a deeper meaning to it.
I do love when Wolverine passes out in the bar, and he just lifts up and it says, what are these undergarments? And he's like, that only took 20 fucking years. No, and anyway, so we kind of skipped over the fact that they're sent to the void, because Paradox, it gets rid of them that way. And, of course, we get the buried 20th Century Fox logo, which is great. I love it. But this is also the part, they've got their big fight, which is great, but also this is the part where another character, crops up. And some people in the audience might have thought, oh, I know exactly who this is. It's like, nope, you don't. Because I knew it immediately.
Yeah.
Because if you were bringing that actor into this movie, it was not going to be for Captain America. But and of course, I don't have a picture from the movie, but this is the character here, Mr. Johnny Storm, from the Fantastic Four. And it was so gratifying when Deadpool gets all excited. He's like, oh my God, he's going to say it. Say what? Avengers or something. Flame on! What? And then the fact that Johnny, this is not where Johnny does not get like a shining moment in this movie. He's going up against Pyro in this scene, and unfortunate for him, he has the wrong power to be going up against Pyro with. He unceremoniously falls to the ground. No, he survives for now. And then we also get Sabretooth.
Oh yeah.
Played by Mr. Tyler Mane. Which is, it was an interesting choice. I would have liked to see Liev Schreiber, as Sabretooth, but this was playing it up as like a big, huge confrontation, and then Logan quickly dispatches him.
Yeah.
But no, this was great. And, I just love that all these guys were like psyched about coming back and, and being part of this. It was just a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and to be clear, this section of the movie is littered with what people would call cameos, but I personally think that a couple of them are a little bit more substantial than that, and Chris Evans as Johnny Storm is one of those because he got his very beautiful ending in Endgame, and it's like. And as we're starting to see, those actors who had their farewell songs are willing to come back in a different role. Robert Downey Jr. will be a big part of the MCU future as well as its past. But it was perfect because I do think that at a certain point we may get Chris Evans back as Captain America again. But this is a nice little interregnum. He gets to do something which he never really got to do in the Captain America movies, other than when he says, "Let's go get this son of a bitch." Here he gets to cut his tongue loose a little bit more, and it's very very classic Johnny Storm fashion. The arrogance and the hot-headedness, quite literally. Are on display, and I do think that his ending in this movie, it's probably part of the reason that Chris Evans agreed to do it, because it is quite definitive in that way. But I do enjoy that he gets a little bit more of a dynamic to play with, and Tyler Mane as Sabretooth. Yes, it would have been cool to see Lee Schreiber, but it is, a nice nod back to the original X-Men film to have Tyler Mane in there. And it is notable that, he is one of the people who does reprise his role. We also get Toad, we get Lady Deathstrike, we get Azrael, we get, the Blob, we get Bullseye from the Daredevil movies. They are all played by actors who are not the original. And that's probably why they're a little bit more background. But it was nice that they got at least one of them.
But even that that works fine for me because again we're in the multiverse and these are and so a lot of these are just variants of even Sabretooth played by the same actor, but we don't know that doesn't mean it's the same version. So it's I was fine with the fact that a lot of these characters were played by different actors because a lot of them were just basically standing in the background of shots, but also like I said, multiverse, so it's fine it's cool to see slightly different versions of them. But yeah, no, I loved seeing Chris Evans just come back as Johnny Storm. It was just so much fun. Do you have anything else to say about that stuff because I wanted to pause and do the mid-roll before we continue on?
No, I mean we'll circle back to it when we get after the mid-roll. But yeah, I did love that they ended up, the end credits joke. That that really honestly paid off the entire character for me. So
yeah. Okay. So as we have previously announced, we're going to be going on a break for a couple weeks because I'm going to be going away on vacation, which I'm really looking forward to. Just because I need to get away, guys. Need to infuse my routine with some variety for a bit, and I'll be gone for a good 10 days. So it's going to be a nice vacation. And so, yeah, when we come back, the first movie we'll be tackling will be Before Midnight, the third film in the Before trilogy. And then we'll just kind of go from there. Our tentative planned films after that are Black Swan and Anna Karenina's. And then we'll just kind of go from there. Some other stuff that we might discuss in weeks to come. Shows we'll be watching. At the end of this month, Rings of Power season 2 is coming out. Batman Caped Crusader just came out, which I won't be able to watch until I get Prime at the end of the month. But I know, Jared, I know you've watched it and you're really like, I actually have gotten to see the first episode because it's available for free on Prime or on Amazon. And I don't know if I'm completely sold on it yet, but it's only one episode. So like, I feel like once I'm able to, watch them all together, I'll get into the groove of it all. But it is like stylistically, like it does like feel, both like and unlike the animated series. And I will say it'd be interesting to see if Bruce himself gets, some story stuff, because I really felt like the characters who jumped off the screen for me in that first episode were some of the supporting characters. And so I wonder if, I mean, you've seen it, so you could probably tell me, but it feels like, Batman maybe is a bit more, in the background, and some of the other characters are kind of stepping to the forefront. But I don't know. I've only seen one episode, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, no, I adored the first season. I'd been looking forward to it from the moment it was announced, and then from the moment David Zaslav decided that, I have a perfect Batman animated series. Let's not put that on Max. Let's let it go to Amazon Prime. But they ended up rescuing it. Bruce Timm, J.J. Abrams, and Matt Reeves, what they did with this show, I just love, because it is very much honoring the spirit of Batman the Animated Series without trying to be Batman the Animated Series, which it could never be because Kevin Conroy is sadly no longer with us. Hamish Linklater, who voices Batman and Bruce Wayne, is not trying to do a Kevin Conroy impression. He is putting his own spin on the character, and the show itself is putting its own spin on the character, very much honoring the classic golden age era of Batman. In particular, the episode that really sold me on the show is the second episode, where we get a different, more classic version of Clayface, and I just thought that episode was outstanding. But I'm not saying that like it's a perfect show. I'm saying that like for me, this is to have a show like this of telling a Batman story in 2024 in an animated form, in addition to also having the live action of the Batman movie and the Penguin show coming later this year, and eventually what we'll get with the new DC films. I'm so glad that there's a rich palette to explore with this character, and to get it in the same year that we are getting, we got X-Men 97, which was more direct continuation of the original X-Men show. This is kind of like a spiritual like reinvention, but again, not trying to displace the original in any way, just kind of, as we've talked about, a character, someone telling a new version of the story of the character based on these set archetypes. And I just thought it looked gorgeous. I loved the story, and I couldn't have been more pleased with it. So, if you when you get a chance to watch it, like, I don't want to hype it up too much. It's again not a perfect show, but I've been thrilled with it. And that really kind of gave me a boost this week when I needed one. So,
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about all the different Batman content that we're getting, because, I know eventually we're gonna get the DCU version of Batman, but for me, we've been over in the stream about how I respect and admire the purpose of like a shared universe of comic book characters. So I'm not going to be dismissive of it. But for me, Batman has kind of always worked best when it's in its own world, so to speak, because I feel like Gotham is such a unique place. It's hard to imagine Gotham being in a world filled with other more normal cities. So for me, like, I'm really enjoying the stuff like, we've done, Joker, we're getting the sequel to that, Matt Reeves, the Batman, and now this. Like, I really love stuff that like sort of boils it down to just sort of the world of Batman and those characters in that world. So so the fact that we've got multiple, you know, takes on the Batman story right now that are totally invested in that world and not, you know, stuff on the outside, like it's just such a treat. Like, you know, it's just, well, that's, those are three different versions of, you know, Batman right now that you know, it just feels like we're being spoiled. And yeah, no, it's so great. As for what I've been watching, I did want to mention this real quick. I won't spend too long on it because we need to get back into discussing the movie. But I did over the past couple of days get to finally watch the entirety of Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, which I had been holding off on. I had seen the PG-13 version of the first film, which I quite enjoyed, but did feel like, oh, it feels like we're missing some things here. And so it was like, so I'm gonna hold off and, you know, on the rest of it until the director's cut came out, and that got released this week, and I watched, you know, it over 2 nights, and I'm not normally the biggest Zack Snyder fan in the world, but I love these movies. I just thought, you know, the world building is incredible. The characters are great. I loved how the story kind of took its time to really build things out. I know these are not the most to say they are not the most critically beloved films would be an understatement, but I find myself increasingly perplexed by the hatred that Zack Snyder seems to inspire. I don't love all of his stuff, but like I've never quite gotten why, you know, people seem to have like a personal vendetta against him. It's kind of weird, but I just had a ball with these movies, and you know, I said this in the Slack and on Twitter. I was like, Sophia Boutella, and she needs to be like a major action movie star because she was astonishing in these movies. Just like I've been a fan of hers since like I remember I really liked her a lot in Star Trek Beyond, and then in Atomic Blonde as well. I know she was in some other stuff, and you know, I loved her in that, and just seeing her here just cemented it. It's like, this is like, for me, it was like on par with like Ellen Ripley and Furiosa, like that much of a badass and like a character who's really going through some shit. And so, yeah, I'm from what I understand, sequels are going ahead, you know, for this franchise, because regardless of what the critics have said, it's done great on Netflix, and at the end of the day, money talks. So, so happy about that. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that for a couple minutes because I really enjoyed the movies, and yeah, so.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that the movies are finding their audience. You know, I also like, I'm not the biggest like Zack Snyder devotee. You know, like he's done some stuff I liked, some stuff I liked less well. Tying it back to Batman, I am actually unironically a huge fan of his director's cut of Justice League, which is infinitely superior to the theatrical version that Joss Whedon got his hands on. But I know that like the dynamic that some people have with his fans, and you know, the sense that some of them might have been a little entitled in asking for that. You know, I understand why he engenders such passion. I also know that you know, this project, one of the things about Rebel Moon is like, it famously was originally Zack Snyder's pitch for a Star Wars movie, and I can see that in its bones. But I'm also very, very glad that it ended up, he allowed it to become its own thing, because I don't think the tone would have worked quite as well for Star Wars, but allowing it to cut loose and just being its own, you know, story, its own universe, that's part of what made its appeal to me. I have not seen the director's cut yet. I'm looking forward to actually to getting to it because, having seen both of the separate parts, my biggest issue with the first half was that it felt like it introduced all these cool new characters who I didn't really get to know quite as much. The second part kind of fixed that issue for me a little bit more. But one thing that was a constant was exactly what you said. Sophia Boutella, she is a star, and unfortunately, like, sometimes you just need the right vehicle to break out. Sophia Boutella, I'd first seen her in like the Kingsman movies. She got her big break with the Tom Cruise The Mummy, which unfortunately didn't, kind of crashed and burned, and that kind of set her back. But I loved her in Star Trek Beyond. And irrespective of what you may think about like this movie as a whole, like I think she's outstanding in it, and it is a true like action heroine type performance that I hope leads to bigger things down the road for her, in addition to potential sequels. Because she just has that striking look and that screen presence that makes her an incredibly compelling heroine to root for. So.
Yeah, no, just absolutely great. And I think of Zach's films, though, the ones that I've probably enjoyed the most, even though it's funny, I have given it a lot of crap in the past, but actually I did greatly enjoy Watchmen when it came out, and it's not perfect, but I still enjoy it a lot. I think like the movie's populated with just an embarrassment of amazing actors, and I love the look of the film. Obviously, it's taken straight from the pages of the graphic novel, but I think the costume design, like everything, the music, it's amazing. And I probably like his other work that I love a lot is the Justice League, because I thought that was really an excellent piece of work, and as you said, much improved over the theatrical version. And then this, I would definitely rank Rebel Moon as one of my favorite Zack Snyder projects. Still not I don't think I'll ever be crazy about his love of slow motion, especially not the way he uses it. It's not quite to my taste, but pretty much everything else in these movies I was on board for. I really liked it, and yeah, I don't know how the PG-13 version of Part 2 measures up, but like the director's cut really lets things breathe in like the first half of the movie, with establishing the relationship between the fighters and the village, and the people in the village, and then the action stuff goes on for a long time, but it's I found it really immersive, and then towards the end of the movie it really keeps you on the edge of your seat. So I was really impressed. So it would be nice to get it on physical media, actually, but somehow I think that's going to be a tough hill to climb, as with most Netflix things. But yeah, so I just wanted to get that out because I really enjoyed it. And now, anything else before we plunge back into the movie?
Nope.
Okay. So we're brought to Paul Rudd, who finally aged, and we get the introduction of Cassandra Nova, and I absolutely loved this character, and I just because there's so much built-in legacy with with Professor X, and I'm obviously aware of the character of Cassandra Nova, though I haven't read the actual comics where she makes an appearance, but I've heard so much about her, and 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 I know a lot of people were expecting her in X-Men '97, so it feels like this was kind of a moment of anticipating, this character, and I thought she was really freaky, in the best way, and played by Emma Corrin, who just does like such a fantastic job. Obviously, they were in The Crown as Princess Diana, and they were amazing in that. And so seeing them, play a villain like this, and like the whole thing with Cassandra's fingers, and that's how like she reads people's minds. I just not like Charles. I have to get a bit more hands on, I just thought it was so fantastic the way they realized this character, and a lot of it comes down to Emma's performance, and yeah, no, I just thought it was great, and yeah, we did. when when Deadpool sells out Johnny by revealing what he actually said. And Johnny tries to defend himself, starts stuttering, and Cassandra puts an end to that by ripping his skin from his body. So
yeah,
oh boy. But no, what did you think of Cassandra? Because I loved her.
Yeah, I thought it was a very effective choice to include her as the villain in this section of the story, because she plays upon the kind of iconography that we're familiar with, in kind of a blend between Professor X and Magneto, because she is Charles Xavier's sister, who we learn essentially was pruned almost shortly after her birth and has lived her entire life in this void, and actually seems pretty content with that, because it's her own like fiefdom to rule. But obviously, she's surrounded by a lot of the former members of the Brotherhood Without Mutants. She's kind of like taken over Magneto's, position there. And we learn, that she also killed Magneto, or at least a version of Magneto, and Deadpool has the sly crack. It's like, okay, now Disney's going to cheap out on the budget. Couldn't afford Sir Ian McKellen or Michael Fassbender. But I actually think it's more effective to have it be an entirely new character to the mythos, even though it's one who's very steeped in comic book lore, because
it actually feels like they could have at least enticed Fassbender, but it's funnier if they to play the joke of Disney cheaping out on the budget at that point. So no, I'm fine with the fact that they didn't have a Magneto, as cool as it would have been, but I think we're still getting that.
Yeah, I mean, we may, because Secret Wars will have a big enough budget to encompass them. But yeah, Cassandra Nova, like, she is terrifying in her power, and we get to see like just how dangerous she is, while also having a very kind of disturbing affect of like kind of like a child queen in many ways. Like, she has that very that very soft-spoken, like almost fanciful nature to her, where she's just like, you boys are so silly, but she also is her very ruthless, and it's the kind of thing of like, whatever horror she went through growing up in this existence, it has hardened her into a person who, is very content to let other people suffer and burn as long as she gets to keep her power. And, that's the deal that she has with Paradox. It's like, I will keep all of your trash here under my boot as long as you, kind of let me rule this place as I see fit. And the fact that Paradox can't even, hold up that end of the deal is what, in many respects, seals the fate for his little plan later. But I really was struck by Emma Corrin's performance, because I'm not as familiar with their work. I have not watched The Crown. I know they've been in a couple of other movies and shows, but like, this was really my big introduction to them. And I just think that they did a great job at making the character feel like a character who has always had their place in the X-Men lore, even if this is the first time we're ever meeting her in this context. And they actually play on that very effectively later with the idea that, like, this is Charles Xavier's twin sister, and he never got to know about her. But if he had known her, he would have, cared for her. He would have loved her. And the fact that she never got to know him is probably part of the reason that she turned out the way that she did, even though, as she alludes to, she did try to strangle him in utero with her umbilical cord. So we're meant to think, see her as kind of a sociopathic type character, but she also kind of has a code of honor about her, and I found her like a fascinating villain in that respect, because the best villains are obviously the ones who think they're the hero of their own story. And I don't know if Cassandra sees herself as a hero, but she definitely sees herself as kind of, doing the purpose that she was meant to fulfill.
Yeah, and I think what ultimately makes her character work so well is something you were talking about. She feels like she's connected into sort of the larger mythos of what we've experienced over all the X-Men films, and there's such an emotional connection to her character because obviously the connection to Charles, but also then what we get later on when with all the stuff that Wolverine says to her, about Charles wouldn't have let me and kill you, and if he had known about you, he would have done absolutely anything to save you. There's so much history there and so much like emotional pathos there that she feels so connected to everything that has gone throughout these movies, and I think that's what really kind of elevates her beyond just okay, she's the villain for this movie. And I just thought they really did a great job with that, because it's kind of hard with these kinds of movies to bring in a new villain and have them sort of stand up and be have an actual presence, especially when the movie is, for the most part, it's a buddy comedy, and so but I thought they actually did a great job of giving her a lot of weight, and I love the stuff at the end of the film when she's in front of the machine, and reality is kind of tearing itself apart, and I just thought visually that stuff was so amazing. So yeah, no, I love Cassandra. I thought she was fascinating. A character who, I don't think she sees herself as, a quote unquote hero, but she's definitely, from her perspective, she is the main character of the story, and she's the one being, and she's not really wrong. She was pruned, she was sent there, and now like Paradox is going against their deal, and he's trying to have her eliminated. Like, it's from her perspective, she's the one being wronged, and she's not wrong about that. So she doesn't have the her system in the Void isn't the greatest. Certainly not, but it's she never really had a chance either. So
and I think she does live up to some of the torrent of insults that Johnny Storm had hurled to her, but also it's not nice to hear those things. I also will say Deadpool, you could have helped a bro out. He was a little too eager to sell poor Johnny out there, and it pays off with the joke. But Wolverine is also very much in the right when he looks at Deadpool's like, "What the fuck, you got him killed?" And Deadpool kind of brushes it off. It's like, "Well, yes, this is on Wade here. This was not a heroic act. Johnny did not deserve to die in this horrific way, basically for the capricious whims of this, child queen kind of ruling over the Void." But it's a Deadpool movie, and they're trying to not everything needs to have that kind of level of serious grounded payoff. You know, some characters are gonna die in like very graphic ways, and this is an effective one.
And of course, later on, you know, with the other Ryan Reynolds Deadpool, with he didn't die for nothing. He died for murder. which speaking of which, let's say I do want to move a little more quickly through some of this stuff, because we're still fairly early in the movies. So but you know, they do end up escaping from there, and you know, they have their bit in the bar, you know, where Logan is, you know, going through, you know, looking for alcohol. He ends up going with like rubbing alcohol. And you know, but they kind of have their first like real conversation, you know, and Wade tells him that, you know, in his universe that, you know, Wolverine really was, you know, admired, and you know, and then we get a bit of a look into this Wolverine, and he's like, he ain't shit in my world. And yeah, it's, you know, and the joke about the head and the wig, and nobody can tell, or nobody knows, and it's like everybody knows. But no, the part I really want to get to though is what comes after that, when they're, you know, encounter, you know, speaking of the other the other Wade, we get the intro. Before we actually see him, we get this guy.
Yep, dog pool Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a classic example of a joke that like they play it to the hilt, and then they play it a little even further than you would go, and it kind of stops being funny, and then it becomes funny again because because the dog just won't stop licking his face.
Oh my, yeah. When yeah, when he starts actually licking like inside his mouth and stuff, I'm like, oh god. It's just so over. And then of course, you know, his owner is like, you know, perfect looking, you know, Ryan Reynolds, you know, which, you know. Now I'm just going to start jumping over, because when he comes back later and he's like, I can gently break the fourth wall too. The proposal. Is that what you think I do?
Yep. That's a brilliant little moment of comedy right there. Yeah, because they do play on the fact that, yeah, like this is, you know, Ryan Reynolds as we classically know him in his much more traditionally handsome, you know, look, but also like him, you know, being like much more like soft-spoken, and, you know, it costs nothing to be kind, and of course this makes Deadpool like just hate his guts all the more, and he's like plotting his murder so that he can steal his dog and his guns, which, you know, again, Deadpool, you know, he's a hero, but he does some selfish shit in this movie. But it's
the look that Logan gives him later on, like, you know, after he's already said he died for murder, and then Deadpool picks up the two guns, and the look Logan gives him is just like, he really would be fine with killing him right there just for that.
Yeah, and as he had tried to do many times throughout this movie, yeah, and I also love in this scene the joke, the callback to the fact that, like, you know, Deadpool had, when he was a used car salesman, had such contempt for the Honda Odyssey, and then of course Nice Fool drives the Honda, which I'm like, this is how you do product placement, folks, or anti-product placement in this game.
Oh god, and then once they start driving that, this is where the film gets into some really, like, starts to dig into the emotion of these characters. I love their interaction in the car when Wade accidentally drops, if they can fix your reality, and Lotus slams on the brakes, and he's like, "What did you just say?" Like, did you just say if? Then it's like, we'll call it. What does he call it? You've seen the movie more recently than me. When Wade says it was a
educated wish.
Educated wish. Did you just say it was an educated fucking wish? And then Logan tears Deadpool apart, and it may be the longest monologue Hugh Jackman has ever had in any of these movies. And it's good. Like, he really performs the hell out of it. And then when he gets all done, Deadpool's like, "I'm gonna fight you now." He's like, "Oh, are you?" He punches him in the face, and this does feel like a callback to Logan, when Daphne, punches him, in the face, which I don't know, might be foreshadowing something. But it's and then we get a great Deadpool and Wolverine brawl, the second one for this movie, but this is, it almost feels like it's meant to be something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, this movie's not subtle with its sexual double entendres, because Deadpool goes nuts with them, like, quite literally. But it also is a brutal scene. They are literally impaling and stabbing one another, and you can read that as sexual if you want, but it's also like fucking brutal. These guys are trying to kill each other, even though they both know, as Wolverine says during that great monologue that you highlighted, like, I wish I could say you'll die alone, but it's one of God's best jokes that you can't die, except that it's on all of us. And that kind of plays into the idea of what we saw with Logan, the idea that, like, for so long Logan couldn't die until the very end, when he finally everything caught up with him at the end. So, like, these characters know that they aren't going to actually be able to kill each other, but they are. That isn't going to stop them from trying, because this is them not talking through their feelings in this scene. This is them, basically just trying to pour all the pain that they're feeling out onto each other, because, Deadpool, like, Wolverine's words cut Deadpool there. And Logan is furious because he allowed himself to hope, and then he realizes that Deadpool has been leading him on, basically so that Deadpool can get what he wants, and whether or not Wolverine actually gets what he needs is secondary to him, which is a very selfish act. So they're both justified in their anger here, but it also means that they are, they're not in the headspace that they need to be to save the world. They can barely get out of each other's way, and it leads to a very almost, again, over the top kind of scene. And speaking of great metatextual moments, like what we talked about, the bye 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 thing earlier. In this scene, when they turn on the radio, what's playing? It's the song from The Greatest Showman, which you're just like, okay, that is pretty perfect. And then they and then they fight, and then they fall asleep, and then they would fight some more, but at a certain point, someone has to come and cut the tension with the knife and cut it.
I do love it when Wolverine just unloads on Deadpool. I don't remember the whole thing, but one of the lines is, "No wonder the Avengers, wouldn't take you, or the X-Men, and they'll fucking take anybody." And and that, of course, is self-loathing on his part, as well. And it's just, it really felt like a speech, like, finally, all this built up rage that has sort of simmered in the Wolverine character for years kind of really comes out, in this scene. And I thought it was beautiful. It's like it is one of my favorite, bits of performance from Hugh Jackman as this character. But yeah, they pretty much knocked themselves out cold after the big fight. I do want to just insert this shot because, oh my God. But yeah, and then they wake up somewhere else and they're greeted by some people. And again, I don't have pictures, of all these characters from this film, but I do have pictures of the characters. First, we get from the original Daredevil movie and her own movie, Elektra, which is great. I loved seeing Jennifer Garner pop up in this. And like I said, I was a fan of the director's cut of the Daredevil film. And, maybe not the best sensitive casting for the character of Elektra. But that's not Jennifer Gardner's fault. And I did love her in the role. So, and then big shocker, we get this guy, Blade himself.
I was so fucking pumped. I mean, I loved seeing Jennifer Gardner. That actually, I had known that was coming because that had been leaked in like a trade report to the Hollywood Reporter like months before the movie's release. So like I knew that she was going to show up there. I had not heard until very shortly before I went to go see the movie that Wesley Snipes would be returning as Blade, and I was just beyond thrilled because I love those two. I love the original Blade movies, especially the first two, and especially Blade 2 so much. And he really, it is notable. He is, in many respects, aside from Howard the Duck, the original Marvel superhero character. One tidbit that I actually noted that was funny was that it was anticipated starting in this movie that Hugh Jackman would set the record for the longest tenured Marvel character, taking the baton back from Patrick Stewart with 24 years between movie appearances. He never got to hold that record because Wesley Snipes takes it from him by his appearance in the same movie. He is now the longest tenured Marvel superhero movie, and seeing him back on screen, especially knowing that Marvel's been trying to get a Blade franchise off the ground with Mahershala Ali, and Wesley Snipes had been kind of supportive of that, but also kind of a little bit, removed from that. And it never seemed like he was going to be able to come back. And then to just see him walk onto the screen, even though he is not a Fox character, he's from New Line, but it's just like, you know what? He's here. He is part of the Marvel legacy. And God damn it, he still looks as cool as he did back in 1998.
Yeah. He's got some light in his goatee, in the movie, and he's still an absolute badass. And I will say that this was kind of inescapable if you didn't see the movie until like a few days, after it was released, as you did. Thankfully, I did not know anything about it because, well, actually, I saw it a few days after it came out too, because I didn't see it until Tuesday, but I was purposely staying off of all social media and every entertainment site because I was like, nope, I'm not getting spoiled on anything they haven't already put out in the trailers. And I had stayed away from that last trailer too, though I did know who was in that trailer. I still like that I didn't actually see it. And especially since they put a rather emotional beat into the trailer, I was like, I'm glad that got saved for the movie. But when freaking Blade walked onto the screen, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Again, another moment where I probably exclaimed something out loud. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And just the way the music kicks up. And then Oh, but you think that this shit just, got unbelievable? Oh, wait until you see who walks in next, who was never even an actual actor playing this character in any other movie, but was talked about, for years. You see that card flying through, and even then, I hadn't like put it together as to who it was going to be, but I was like, "Oh shit, it's Gambit." But then when he walks in, I'm like, "Oh god!" like, total like going headfirst into like the completely accurate Gambit costume, just really going for it. And I was like, this is amazing. And yeah, it's just like, I didn't have a full audience at my showing, but like, it was a really enthusiastic audience.
Yeah.
And people who were obviously like, huge Marvel fans. And so like, there was a great response, to this whole sequence. And I was, at this point, I was just like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah, and it's just it was so. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then it's like, you must be the others, that were alluded to, and didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were retired, retarded, retired. I'm not trying to get canceled. And then and who are you supposed to be? I'm Gambit, mon ami. What? I'm sorry. What do you say? That was a great rhyme.
Yeah. I mean,
Who's your dialect coach?
Who's your dialect coach? The Minions. Which that might have been the hardest I laughed throughout the entire movie because, like generally you don't want to make fun of people's accents, but he was laying it on deliberately thick, especially after having come off the, having seen Gambit in X-Men '97, where like he had his classic Cajun accent, but it was a little bit more easier to understand, shall we say? And in this case, Channing Tatum, who never got to play the role in the unproduced Gambit movie, I thought it was, a nice touch that they let him come back for this, as opposed to, bringing in Taylor Kitsch from Wolverines. And they play on that joke where he's like, maybe I was born here in the void. Like, nice touch. But again, it's the idea that it's going to engage with all levels of the Marvel fandom. We have a character in Elektra, Jennifer Garner's Elektra, from movies that were, even if her performance was was liked, the movies were not as well received, especially her spinoff. And then there's Blade, who is loved, especially the first two movies, but it is notable that there was another connection to Blade from, Ryan Reynolds was very much in Blade Trinity, and supposedly he and Wesley Snipes had some tension there, but it was Ryan Reynolds' idea to get Wesley Snipes into this movie, and, kind of smooth things over in that way, which I thought. And then Gambit, Channing Tatum, who never got to play the role that he wanted to play, but now he gets the chance in a very, in a new context. So it's kind of running the spectrum from, beloved classics to, a little bit more redemption stories. And obviously it pays off with the fourth member of the others, which is just an unambiguous emotional triumph to have that character come back. So
yeah, and I was able to get a picture from that third trailer, which I watched after I saw the movie, and it's Laura. She returns, which I was just so happy about. It's so cathartic just to see her reunited with a version of her father. And it really tugged on all the strings. And the fact that when she enters the room, they play the Logan score, and it's just, oh my god, it's so good. And then Wade being like, oh my god, it's her. And
which they had primed us for by showing us those scenes with her crying over.
And also he fills Wolverine in about Laura as well, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was built up really well, and and I love the fact that, you know, skipping ahead a bit, but the movie ends with her, you know, joining, you know, Logan, you know, in the Fox universe, and so that's, for me, that's a promise of more to come, I feel. And my personal opinion, like, I'm perfectly fine, you know, and I said this when Logan came out, and I feel the same way now, especially since she's, you know, entered the MCU. It's like, I'm perfectly fine if she is the Wolverine successor. And I have to imagine that that's at least a conversation that's happening. So yeah.
I think that she will, you know, not just because Daphne Keane is a rising star, you know, very much her summer with The Acolyte, and now her return in this movie, but this has been something I was hoping for, that if they were going to bring, you know, Wolverine back, that they would acknowledge not just like the events of Logan, but specifically the emotional bond that he shared with Laura, because it was so emotional and so essential, as we discussed in our Logan stream last week. And I do believe that, you know, while all these characters may be variants of, you know, I do personally, it's my headcanon that this is the Laura from that Logan, you know, film. Or at least one who went through an almost identical experience, because the movie directly leans on that relationship and that dynamic. And like, it is very clear that this Laura, which again may be the one from Logan or something very similar, she lost her version of Logan in a very similar way, and it left an impression on her. But that's why that scene is so powerful, when she says, "I got to have a life because of you." And we know what that life was. It wasn't necessarily a great life, but it was a life that he gifted to her.
The only, like, yeah, the only like stumbling block to that, but like, it's already kind of, this is the thing. Like, on some level, I want it to be just a variant who did, like, where one tiny little thing happened differently, just because the movie Logan feels so removed from, you know, like, I can't watch that movie and feel like that Laura is crossing over to the Deadpool, you know, franchise in the MCU. But they already kind of broke that down with the fact that Deadpool actually digs up that Logan's grave, and that is unambiguous. So that's one of those things where I just have to be like, well, don't worry about it. This is just something different. And yes, it's the same character, but it's just a completely different kind of movie. So don't worry about it. But even if I think it's a variant of Laura, it's a variant where there's only like one tiny little difference, because in every respect, it does feel like the Laura from that movie, from that universe. So, so yeah, it's just one of those things where you have to be like, no, you know, Logan tonally it's just its own thing. And if you're watching, you know, the Deadpool and the MCU version of these things and using those characters, it's just going to feel and be different. So just don't get too stressed out. But yeah, it's I just love it. And their scene, you know, by the campfire is just so beautiful. Just, and you know what? When I always wondered about that line in the second trailer where, you know, it's cut like he's talking to Deadpool, where he says, "Trust me, kid, I'm no hero." And the more I thought about it, I was like, it's kind of weird that he's calling Deadpool kid. And then when I heard that that Laura was in that third trailer, I was like, okay, he's delivering that line to Laura. He's got to be, and yeah, and that turned out to be the case,
Yeah.
And it was just, and yeah, just I'm not, you know, I'm the wrong guy, and you were always the wrong guy until you weren't, and it's just so beautiful and such a amazing, just the follow up to Logan and the emotion of that story, and I'm just so happy that we got to see this. It's just so rewarding.
Yeah, this is by far my favorite scene in the movie, even as there are many other great scenes. But like, this is the reason that the movie works emotionally for me as well as it does, because it is engaging with the story of Wolverine and his relationship and all the deep pain that he's gone through from multiple perspectives, from his perspective as the character who had let down his entire world, from Laura's perspective as a character who had, lost her father before she really got to know him, but also, got a life because of him, and had never thought that she would have the opportunity to say these things to him, and now she does. And to say that, like, I understand you now. I understand you better now that I am older, and now that I have gone through some of the life experiences that I've seen, and the suffering that I've experienced. I understand you. I see you. And then obviously our meta relationship as the audience with these two characters and the love that we had for them both. But I thought it was, as you said, like, it was essential that when Wolverine, this version of Wolverine, was going to finally open up, that it was to a character like Laura and not to Deadpool. Because frankly, yes, he does open up to Deadpool like later, but like at this point, they're not in the place where they can have that conversation. It needs to come from an external influence. It needs to come from a moment, like a pure moment of compassion, because we can see in this scene just how much compassion Laura has for this man, even though he is not the same, he's not the father who sacrificed his life for her, but she sees that spirit in him, and she knows, like, this is fundamentally the same guy who would make that sacrifice if he could. And she, and that's why the line, the hammer line, the best line in the movie, in my idea, you always were the wrong guy until you weren't. Like, it hits like a ton of bricks, because this feels like her paying off that entire relationship, these words that she's wanted to say to him for so long. And that's why I love the fact that, even though it's a thrill to see her kicking ass as X-23 later in the movie alongside the Blade
with
her glasses, and I love that they confirm at the end that she and the others do manage to get out of the void, even though we only see her at the end, because it does feel like she deserved, as you said, it was always kind of a bittersweet note for us as the audience that we were introduced to the character of Laura, and she had so much promise, as wonderfully portrayed by Daphne Keane, and then it seemed like we weren't going to get any more of her. And now we not only do, and we get the emotional payoff, but then we also get the promise that she could continue on, and we could get that story as with her as the new Wolverine. And it works in the movie, it works in the larger universe. And I just thought it was a brilliant story choice.
Yeah. Oh, so great. And okay, so and they all get revved up to go, and take down Cassandra. But there's some humorous exchanges first. It's like, you knew Johnny, and oh yeah. Oh, yeah, there was nothing I could do for it. And then, Wolverine who is not giving a damn at this point. He's just trying to drown his sorrows in the bottle. And I love that he taps off the scene with light, everybody's revved up, and Deadpool is like, let's fucking go. And he goes, you're all gonna die. He's like, read the room. Yeah, it's just, I love it. And it is so great just seeing this team up, go into battle. And and after the talk with Laura, Wolverine, you know gets revved up for the fight too. And and he goes, and it's just so great when he comes out of the back of the car. And he's also, which by the way, we should say by this point in the movie, he's removed his sleeves, so like we're getting closer and closer to that classic, that classic Wolverine look. And yeah, now obviously I don't have any pictures of the other characters in the big fight because, spoilers. So Marvel hasn't released any of that stuff yet. But yeah, it's so great. I just love getting to see these characters, in action. And there is that when they're driving there, and and Blade says, and only one blade, only ever gonna be one blade. When Deadpool looks at the audience.
which works on a meta level of like, yes, there is gonna be another Blade, and I do hope we see Mahershala Ali's Blade one day. But on the other hand, it's like that movie's going through some developmental problems right now. So this is the Blade we have for now. But if that be the case, then let him get all the glory of his classic line. Some motherfucker's still trying to ice skate uphill, which I pump my fist. I will say that is my second favorite Blade line, because my favorite comes from Blade 2 when he is surrounded by a ravaging horde of vampiric monsters, and as they race in to tear him to shreds, he just looks around them with absolute contempt and says with perfect intonation, "You obviously do not know who you are fucking with." And then proceeds to kill them all.
I have not seen the Blade films in a long time, but I feel like I really want to revisit Blade 2. Because
Guillermo del Toro is just a classic.
Like I was not the Guillermo del Toro fan back then that I am now. Like, and he's obviously gone on to do bigger things since then. But knowing how much I adore his filmmaking, like I have to imagine that going back to that one especially will be really rewarding. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to make an appointment to do that sometime soon. And so we've got this big, huge, fight scene, all these characters get their little moments to shine, especially, especially Gambit. And, it's just, it's a whole lot of fun. But, we have the confrontation with, Cassandra, and this is part you alluded to earlier. She's like, boys are so silly. But it's so great. There's the the moment where Wolverine confronts her, and oh man, she is just like, I love all her moves where she's just flicking her hands up and making Wolverine just basically her plaything. Because his whole game plan here is he knows he's not going to be able to overcome her that way, so he's just trying to distract her long enough, because of course the plan is to get Juggernaut's helmet and get it on her so that they can force her to help them get out of there. And but we get this really great scene where she goes into Logan's head, and he's confronted with everything he's been kind of going through and tormented by. And I loved this scene because it really felt like yes, she's the villain and she's, overpowering him, but it does feel like there's a certain degree of sympathy when she's inside his head, and it really felt emotional, and uh, and like it feels like she's being somewhat sincere when she's like, "I've got you," it's just the way that Emma Corrin plays it was just so beautiful, and just to see again Hugh Jackman just like brings all that emotion to the character. It just like, and this is why I was so excited just to see him, coming back, because like I have so much emotional investment in any version of this character, and just to see that pain and that regret that that he's going through, it just it's so good.
Yeah, no, I mean this is a scene where, as you said, like it's ultimately a mind game on both fronts, because Wolverine goes into this scene knowing that he's going to need to just effectively distract Cassandra long enough so that they can get the helmet on her. But in order to do that, he's going to have to do what he has been dreading to do for this entire movie, which is really reckon with the past and the weight of his failure from his original universe. And while they don't give us like the full entire picture, we get more of a sense of the idea that like he wasn't there when his family were being attacked, were being hunted, and then they all died. And then when he, after the fact, he just went on kind of a bloody, murderous rage tour that ended up erasing whatever sympathy people would have had for the X-Men in this universe. And so you get the sense of why his world looks down on him so much, and why he looks down on himself, because he had effectively, he had that opportunity and he let it slip through his fingers. And seeing him like fully acknowledge that for the first time, like it's heartbreaking, because we had seen like Wolverine, kind of play with those standoff dynamics in the original X-Men films, always trying to kind of hold himself apart. But that's a Wolverine who ultimately did always show up for for Storm, for Jean, even for Scott. He was always there. He was always the X-Man in the end. And this is a Wolverine who never took that chance. And Hugh Jackman, even though we don't see those events, Hugh Jackman makes you feel the pain of that for him to have lost. But it's also one of the reasons why it's so effective. As we see this emotional devastation, we know that he actually does have more of a handle on it than he's letting on, because when Cassandra Nova's, as she looks at him, he's like, "I got you," and then he raises his eyes, so he's like, "No, we got you." And then they trap her with Juggernaut's helmet, and you're just like, brilliantly well played. Of course, it doesn't go to plan because of freaking Pyro, but well done.
but because they, and this is really where the powerhouse comes in. They save her life, from Pyro. I love Wolverine when it says, it comes almost close to a fourth wall break himself here, where he's like, not everybody gets a speech. Which is so great. I love that. But then, man, when I hear he's got another speech, he gets to make another speech here, and he talks about the fact that Charles would never, stand here and let you die, and and if he knew about you, he would have. I don't remember his exact words, but he basically that he would have pulled heaven and earth to to save you, and on this day, I'm finally proud to wear this uniform, because on this day I am an X-Man, and it's just it's like so much is built up to this moment for this character, and this just feels like it's a culmination of so many years of you waiting for Wolverine to like not just be at peace with like being part of that team, but to loudly proclaim himself in X-Men. And it was just really emotional. And yeah, again, I'm just repeating myself, but Hugh Jackman, man, like
Mhm.
I think this is the reason why, like, it's so great that it worked out this way, that he did come back, and that he's gonna be able to put his stamp on Wolverine in the MCU, because there's so much weight that's associated with his take on the character, and it would have been a tall order for somebody to come in and just you know try and step into his shoes, which and we may still see another you know version of Wolverine, of Logan rather. And but like, the fact that he was able to come in and and be part of this world, I think it's really important. Um and just, yeah, it's just another great scene.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, even though these movies are ultimately Ryan Reynolds, baby, and he is the star, like Deadpool comes first in the title, like, it is a testament to his regard for both Hugh Jackman as his friend and as a performer and as this character, that he really lets Hugh Jackman carry the bulk of this movie's emotional weight in these scenes. Deadpool has his own arc, he goes through his own story, he gets his hero moments too, but like, this is really a Hugh Jackman, like, hero, Wolverine as the hero moment, because as you said, it's like, this is him fully reckoning with the idea of what it means for him to be, as Wade says, the X-Man in many ways, and again, like, for people who have seen the X-Men, who are more devoted to the X-Men comics, I know that, as we touched on last week, there is a little bit of tension of the fact that, like, Wolverine kind of in many ways became larger than the X-Men in some ways, but it's also a fact that was the case with these movies, and people love this character and they love Hugh Jackman as this character.
And hey, guess what? And it's completely valid to feel that way, but like, Hugh Jackman originated this role in 2000. There's 24 years of legacy built up of this version of the X-Men, where, guess what? Wolverine is the central figure of this. Like, it's, at what point is something merely an adaptation that you may not agree with, and at what point does it become a substantial part of the legacy of the story and of this character? The Hugh Jackman, I feel like a long time ago, ceased to be just an actor playing a take on a character from Marvel Comics, and solidified this Wolverine as a staple of of cinema and in Marvel history. And I think even if you would have preferred another take on Wolverine and his place in the X-Men, you can't deny the fact that for almost a quarter of a century, he's established something that that has stood the test of time, and is a very important part of this universe. So yeah, it's
and again, in the classic, like, yes and spirit, if you want the more classic X-Men team up kind of story, X-Men 97, we're getting both.
And which, by the way, none of this is to say that, like, we aren't going to get a more sort of original dynamic when they establish sort of the main MCU X-Men. But I just feel like that's not here yet. They're taking their time to really honor the past of X-Men. They're doing that brilliantly with both bringing in the Fox legacy characters for this current era of the films, and also with X-Men 97 on the television side. For the next few years, they're going to honor the 90s era of, the animated series. And then once they've rewarded, the fans who love both of those iterations, then they're going to, I feel like that's when they're going to introduce their proper, sort of MCU version of these characters, which I'm totally fine with. Yeah, because I'm living my best life right now with with both getting getting fan service for both the animated series and the Fox films, by Marvel Studios. It's just like, I'm fine with just enjoying this period of time that we're in right now.
Well, indeed.
So now that's sort of the emotional catharsis, and now, entering into this final act, we can just sort of finish this off, by like, going on about how fun this this final sequence is. They go back, and of course they're reunited with Mary Poppins, Deadpool. Poor nice guy Deadpool gets horribly dispatched when Deadpool just straight up murders him. To get both Dogpool and the gold guns. But and of course this is when we're treated to and all the other Deadpools from the void, who have for the moment taken up sides with they're taking their orders from Cassandra. Like, I just want to say that when I saw Lady Deadpool, I said to myself, there are two options here and two options alone.
Yes.
Either this is Anya Taylor-Joy or it's Blake Lively. And I was definitely leaning towards, I think it's Blake Lively, especially when she started talking, because it didn't sound like Anya. But and then I read the articles afterwards. I was like, Blake Lively, which was perfect. And there's a whole bunch of other cameos from other actors, playing the other Deadpools. I think Matthew McConaughey's in there.
Yep, as Cowboy Deadpool, and I believe I think it's Nathan Fillion, who just always has to pop up in these movies. I think he's had like 3 or 4 separate, disguised MCU roles. But he's Headpool, which you're just like, yeah, that works. And then just the constantly like more ridiculous versions, like the very country specific versions of like Canada Pool and Welsh Pool, and and then the little baby Deadpools, and this is just an excuse for them to cut loose and have fun. And yes, it was not Anya Taylor-Joy, although they do get their like. I appreciated they got their Mad Max Furiosa cracks in there, because those scenes in the void were very evocative of that. And of course, Anya Taylor-Joy did have a role as an X-Men in the New Mutants, so they could have put her in there. But yeah, it had to be Blake Lively.
No, I did love that part earlier. Yeah, I give you your Furiosa. Oh, so great. Yeah, and so they're preparing to fight off all of the Deadpools. He gets his guns. And then this is where Madonna comes in.
Yep.
And we get their slow motion walking out. And I was able to nab some pictures from YouTube. Absolutely had to. We could not have this stream without showing it. When they walk out slowly, and this is when the man pulls out the big guns, the mask. Hell yes. I this was just amazing. Yeah, I love Deadpool's reaction. Holy shit. Pull out the big guns for special occasions, killing mostly.
And of course he throws in a blowjob joke because it's Deadpool. But yes, it's but yeah, I the mask, it had to come once they were giving the original costume, and then once the sleeves came off, you're like, the mask is coming. Complete with white eyes and all, which again, I kind of feel like, I'm glad that it was saved for this moment, because I do tend to like being able to see the actor's eyes. But in this scene, it's like, complete the classic look, for God's sake. Just let him have the whole thing.
Well, and it works too, because they've already established Deadpool with the white eyes. So, and it works. I was very happy with the look. And it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're fucking seeing this. Like, oh my, yeah, no, I was just in a state of pure euphoria, and just the blood and carnage that follows. Like my audience was cracking up once all that blood goes spilling all over the place, and Wolverine just repeatedly stabbing the other Deadpools, and it was amazing. And then of course they're all okay. And he's like, oh, so these guys regenerate. Oh God, just so. And then of course Peter saves the day by just coming in, and because everybody loves Peter. Oh God.
Yeah.
So great. And and then they go in to stop actually, I want to pause for a moment here, because I do want to throw major props to someone that we haven't mentioned yet, and I'm trying to I'm gonna have to look up her name because I'm not familiar. Oh God, where? This is one hell of a cast. So I'm the character B-15 from Loki.
Oh yeah.
I may not be getting this right, but Wunmi Masaku. She's just like, I was so happy to see her, because it's one thing to have the TVA, but I wanted some like character connection to Loki. And yeah, no, she was great. I love the thing going on between her and Peter. I was like, oh.
Yeah, he just has that animal magnetism, apparently. But I do, yeah, I was not anticipating it would be her as our connection. I was thinking that, like, oh, maybe they're going to bring in Owen Wilson as Mobius or something. But like, considering where those characters ended in Loki, I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense.
It made more sense for it to be her. That said, I am absolutely hoping to see Owen Wilson, again, and and especially on the big screen and something. So hopefully that's coming, soon. But no, I thought it worked great to have her. I really loved her character in Loki, and So yeah, she comes in sort of, later in the film, and she figures out that something's going on, and that Mr. Paradox is, up to some shady shit. But anyway, so cutting back, I love this part because, Deadpool and Wolverine, go underneath to stop Cassandra. I don't remember exactly the hows or the whys of what they're trying to do. I have to see the film again, but I love that it's kind of like they're choosing between which one of them is gonna
Yeah.
go. And of course, Deadpool was going to, it's his movie, so he's got to be the one to try and sacrifice himself. Even though I have to say, it does make a whole lot more sense for Wolverine to say that he's going to be the one because, as much as we love Wolverine, he is the one who, like, his whole world is, in such a sad state, but also from Deadpool's point of view, not only does he have to be the hero, but also I think he's still thinking about the fact that he needs Wolverine to stick around in his world because what's on his mind is the fact that Logan was the anchor person of the universe. So he's also thinking about still trying to do what he can to save his world. So yeah, it's a moment of sacrifice that he ultimately like does not share alone because Wolverine does come through. And like this is the part where they used like a prayer that I just went crazy for, just bringing in like the chorus and stuff. I just thought it was so amazing. Again, like I wish to God that was on the soundtrack and it's not, but the rights must have been like a nightmare just to get it in the film. And the idea of getting clearance to put it on the soundtrack must have been like, no, that's not going to happen.
Well, maybe a special edition because this movie has certainly made enough money to cover those royalties, even for Madonna. But yeah, I like the idea that they play with the idea of who's going to be the one to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And we get the emotional moment, and then we get the reversal. But ultimately, given the fact that this is Deadpool and Wolverine, you knew like it's going to have to be both of them, isn't it? Two can do what one alone cannot, and they make that quite literally with the fact that like Deadpool can't reach between the antimatter and the matter, pillars. So like he literally needs to join hands and forces with Wolverine to manage that. But also the idea that, one of them may have been annihilated, but the two of them together are strong enough to reverse the flow. And
and then of course we get that great moment when, when Matthew McFadden's like playing up that, that he was involved in trying to stop it. And like, you feel like he might almost be able to sell this bullshit line. But then of course, Deadpool and Wolverine come out. It's like, fuck! Such a great moment.
Yep. No, I mean, that pesky healing factor, it paid off, and it is an effective moment, that we like, Cassandra Nova for all of her understandable motivations. She is trying to wipe out all of existence here, out of jealousy and rage at her betrayal. So yeah, she's got to go, and go she does. She gets annihilated in turn, but it is a very effective, even though it doesn't feel quite as like world-shaking apocalyptic as perhaps it's played out to be. It is treated as a moment of real, danger for our main characters, and for all the people that they care about, and Cassandra Nova is an effective vehicle for that because she's far more dangerous than old Mr. Paradox over there. But yeah, it's they have to go all the way down to the countdown to the 1%, and then they reverse it, and as with like a prayer starts to swell up, and you're just like, and you see Cassandra like starting to panic as she's losing control, and you're like, you're done, lady, you're done.
But no, yeah, and I thought she was an incredibly effective villain and character, and I love the visuals of those images I just showed. I thought they, and definitely recalling some stuff from Loki, and just I thought because I did feel sympathy for her. you
Yeah.
know, at the end, trying to destroy the fabric of reality. But but she was wrong too.
Yeah.
So yeah. No, I thought that was great, and tip my hat to Emma Corrin. Kind of hope they get to play another version of this character at some point in the future. We're still in the multiverse. I don't know if, or maybe we'll get a completely different iteration of that character, at some point later down the line. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed the character for this film. And again, like I do love the way this movie leaves. I love that we're almost teased with Wolverine might just walk away, and this is it for him in the MCU, where because Wade says, so I'd see you around, and he's like, probably not. He gets up, starts walking away, but then he calls out to me, he's like, hey Logan, and then he invites him home, and then we get an absolutely great moment with Al. Bring in, he's holding a dog pool, and and she reaches out and she's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, no. What Leslie Uggams, she's great in this role. And as I said, she gets a little bit more to do than most of the Deadpool original supporting cast, Morena Baccarin accepted. But yeah, it's good to know that like some people have gone through emotional arcs over the course of these movies. Bly now has not. She's still jonesing after the devil's dandruff, and will not be happy until she gets it.
And by the way, and we do find out that because of what's happened over the course of this film, that this universe has been saved. And maybe due to I don't completely know if it's become, maybe Deadpool's become a bit of an anchor person for the universe, and I just thought that was great, because, and also on a metatextual level, because one of the things that has so pissed me off, like ever since the Fox sale, every single time there's been a tease about X-Men characters being in an MCU movie. I remember hearing about it, especially when Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was out. Like, there were so many people like on YouTube and stuff going on about, in this movie, Wanda's gonna destroy the Fox universe, and like they were happy about that. It's like, yeah, we need to wipe the Fox movies from existence. They never happen. And this is what we've been talking about, that actually what Marvel Studios has instead done is they're honoring the legacy of those movies, which thank God. And so this movie actually ends with the quote unquote Fox universe being saved, which just felt so vindicating for me. I was like, yes. And so to those people who just want all those movies erased, I say, suck it.
Yeah, not everything needs to be a zero-sum game, and the internet is always going to be like, winners and losers, and if for one thing to be good, the other thing has to suck or be like discarded. And it's like, expand your horizons, people. This is the multiversal saga, more than one version of these characters, of these timelines can exist, and not everything needs to be destroyed or thrown away, and that is really kind of the idea that makes this movie work as well, because Wade and Logan, this version of Logan, were two broken people who in many ways felt like they were going to be thrown away by their worlds or their universes, but ultimately they saved their world, they saved each other, and they were the heroes that they needed to be. And now, regardless of whether or not they come back in later films, I think it's almost a certainty that we'll see Deadpool in some of the Avengers movies. We may or may not get Hugh Jackman ever again, but this feels like a fitting place to leave the character once again, in a more hopeful manner than we did at the end of Logan, because I personally think it was essential that, as you alluded to earlier, the fact that we not only see we see Logan at the Deadpool's party and at the end, but we see Laura as well.
Yeah. I would say that maybe it was potentially a little up in the air about whether he's going to come back yet again before this movie came out. But after the success that it's been, I would be shocked if Hugh Jackman doesn't return for at least one of the Avengers films, coming out in a couple of years. I think that's probably it.
Yeah.
Because that'll be bringing the multiverse, saga to a close, and and it feels like after that point they will probably want to sort of move on to establishing, the X-Men in the sort of MCU proper, which I hope does, like, going back to what I was saying before, I hope that includes Laura as the successor to Wolverine. Or at least, as if they do have another Logan, then at least carry her forward too. I know I've read some people suggesting that she could be part of the Young Avengers, that they're establishing right now, which I'd like to see that too. I think that's a good idea too. So, yeah. I'm fine with him hanging up the claws after, after these next Avengers movies. So long as, like, I need Laura to continue on. We need X-23, moving forward in the franchise. And if this is the last we see of, Hugh Jackman, it's not. He's going to be back at least one more time. But if it is, I think this was also a very fitting and rewarding, ending, and gave a lot of satisfaction to those of us who have, sort of dreamed about what this version of Wolverine, could be, and does feel like it. Despite the way the movie starts, does feel like it honors the legacy of Logan. So, and that brings us to the end, except for, of course, the post-credit sequence, which is hilarious. But I still don't agree with Wade. I think he's still very much culpable.
Oh, I think
Johnny Storm.
Yeah, it was worth it to see Chris Evans actually say the words, that I can't even remember what those some of the stuff was, but like when he tells her, he calls her a megalomaniacal psychotic asshole, but then he goes into much more graphic detail about what the last thing I can do in this godforsaken cum gutter existence is light that fuck box on fire. I still won't die happy. And you're just like, Steve Rogers.
It did also feel like bringing a touch of Ransom from Knives Out.
Yes.
As well. God,
no, but it was well worth the payoff, and classic in the sense of, like, the post-credit stingers was, it's not teasing the next chapter in the lore, it's just, paying off a joke from earlier in the movie. But I actually think that even though this movie only has one post-credit scene, what they chose to do with the credits, actually, like, that really felt like the right choice. To pay, for a movie that was a love letter to the Fox X series, and not just the X-Men, as you alluded to, but also the other Fox properties of, the Fantastic Four and Elektra, and Blade's not in there because he was New Line, but, like, it's implied as well. But seeing the young clips of the behind the scenes clips of all the actors, of young Hugh Jackman, of young Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson. I loved that they included the clip from X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is famously, like, you know, people were not happy with how Deadpool was handled in that movie, but seeing the passion that Ryan Reynolds was talking about the character, and he's like, I hope, you know, I always loved this character. I hoped I would get a chance to play him one day. And it's like, knowing that he would get that chance not only in that movie, but then he would get a second chance later on. It's so cool. And I also love, you know, the fact that, like, they are honoring the fact, like, the entire spectrum of it, you know, seeing the Fantastic Four, seeing even the Josh Trank Fantastic Four, which is probably the most beloved of any of them. But, like, you know, Michael B. Jordan was, you know, he did a good job in that movie. Like, you know, he is part of this legacy too.
And that's really what's really touching about this movie is, and I was listening a bit to what Kevin Smith was talking about it, because he posted a review about it. Like, this movie honors, you know, even the sort of the characters in the movies that maybe didn't work as well as, you know, as the things that did. And but it's saying, but you were carrying the torch at a time when there was no MCU, or, you know, that, you know, a big studio like Disney, you know, before they were behind it, you know, when these movies were still in their infancy. And that even if, you know, your film wasn't as well regarded, it's like, we're saying, we see you, and you were an important part of this family and this saga. And there's just something that's so touching about that, you know, for this movie, which is like, speaks to me, because I've always said that, like, I take the Fox Marvel, you know, films, like, I give some of them a lot of grief, especially like X3, X-Men Origins, Wolverine. But you know what? I'll take them all, because that series of films meant so much to me. And there is something in every single one of those films that I enjoy, you know. And I mean, for the love of God, if nothing else, X3 gave us Kelsey Grammer as Beast, you know, which is just like, you want to show like how great a decision that was. Just look at how I freaked out seeing him in the post-credit scene of the Marvels. Just like, yeah, it's like I said earlier, these films meant so much to me. And just to see that not just the best of them was honored in this movie, but like every single bit of them, you know, and I just love that. And in addition to, you know, also all the other stuff that's shown in the end credits, also I love the fact that, and obviously they were a huge part of the X-Men, but seeing the younger cast of, you know, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, you know, it just
Sophie Turner,
yeah, it that was great, and meant a lot. And I actually hope that some of those actors get the chance to do a little something in the next couple of years in the Marvel Studios films. But if not, I'm glad that this tribute was there in this film. You know, it really struck an emotional chord with me, and that's the way I felt about the whole movie.
Yeah, and seeing like the younger actors, you know, all smiling behind the scenes, talking about like their characters and how excited they are to play them, and, you know, how, you know, they hope that people like them, and, you know, knowing the relationship that people would go on to have them. And then, and the, you know, and speaking of perfect song choices, choosing to set it to Green Day's "I Hope You Had the Time of Your Life," you know, I thought that was incredibly fitting. And to conclude it all with, you know, after having, you know, kind of teased it throughout the movie, you know, throwing showing like, having Deadpool say, "Suck it, Fox, I'm going to Disney World," and showing the like discarded 20th Century Fox logo in the void, and playing on the wink, wink, nudge, nudge to end that montage with showing the actual 20th Century Fox logo. It hit harder than I was expected because, not in addition to the Fox X-Men movies, like I think about like the fact that like, that was the studio that released Star Wars, the originally, that is the studio that has, gave us a lot, even though it's now part of the larger Disney, umbrella, like it, its legacy is still secure. And like, you can say that about like a studio that might be like a little bit more cynical to think about, but it's like it gave people joy with the stories that it told. So it was right that we honor it and, that legacy in this way, but more specifically the people who made it. So,
Yeah, and that sequence in the end credits, just like, because the tone of Deadpool is so sort of satirical and kind of, looking at this stuff with a sort of sarcastic grin. But this montage in the credits is so sincere and so touching that, like, that's what really drives home that this whole movie is a complete love letter to all those movies and to Marvel's history before Marvel Studios, and it is exactly the kind of thing that I was hoping for. And yeah, it's this movie just brought such a huge grin to my face, and like I said, I laughed, I teared up, I was just so happy watching this, and so yeah, so I'm not interested in talking about whether it's quote unquote one of the best or whatever. I know it's one of my favorite MCU films, and I haven't been the biggest, and over the years I haven't been the biggest MCU fan, but I will say, like, for all the crap that some fans have been giving Marvel over the past couple of years, I will say that my 3 favorite Marvel Studios films have come from the post Endgame era. So take that. I'd say it's probably my favorite one. Some of my favorite films have been Spider-Man: No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and this one. And so yeah. So anybody who wants to argue with me over that, don't bother, because I'm not going to listen. But yeah, I'm just so happy with this, and now I feel primed and ready for the future of them bringing in not only the X-Men into the MCU, but I am really pumped and excited for the Fantastic Four, especially hearing that it's going to be taking place in an alternate timeline that's set in the futuristic 60s. I just think that sounds incredible and exactly perfect for the Fantastic Four, and I'm really psyched for that cast. As much as we talked about, yes, bring back Jessica Alba as as that version of Sue Storm in the Avengers movies. But I will say, as far as like perfect casting, I don't think you can beat their casting for Sue in the new one. And again, like, I'm drawing a blank on. I know the actress so well.
Vanessa Kirby.
Vanessa Kirby. Yeah, I've loved her ever since. Again, I know you haven't seen the show, but The Crown, she was just absolutely phenomenal in that, and so I could not have picked a better Sue Storm. And then, of course, to have our beloved Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic. Like, not who I would have thought of for the role,
Yeah.
but but I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
Because everybody loves Pedro. So, yeah. And, I'm not familiar with the actor for Johnny Storm, but I know.
He actually in two things. One, Joseph Quinn. He's most beloved in from Stranger Things season 4 as the character of Eddie Munson. But if you go back and watch Game of Thrones season 7 episode 4 and take a closer look at one of the gate guards who tries to deny Arya entry to Winterfell, you might recognize him.
Oh, okay. I can picture him in my head, actually. And then, of course, we have an Andor alum playing, the Thing.
The Thing,
and that's going to be great. He's a really good actor.
Eben Moss-Bachrach, obviously many people will know from The Bear, but yes, for me, he's Skeen from Andor.
And then I hear they got somebody good for Doctor Doom, who may or may not be in the first Fantastic Four movie, but we know he's coming.
I believe Galactus is going to be the villain of the first Fantastic, and they got Ralph Ineson to voice him, which is great.
God.
But I loved his reaction to being cast. He's like world devouring baddie, is it? I'll do my best. But I have a feeling they're going to tease Doom at the end of it, and then lead into Doomsday, which will. Robert Downey Jr. in full evil regalia. I'm a little hyped for
it. And I know some people are being cynical about it, but it's the multiverse. This is the kind of stuff they actually should be doing. I'm a bit more positive in general about what the MCU has been doing the last couple of years than most people are. But I will say one place that I feel like they've sort of a missed opportunity was going a bit wilder with the concept of the multiverse, because there were so many interesting possibilities for crazy shit they could have done with bringing in actors to play certain roles. So I'm like, do you want to have Robert Downey Jr. play Victor Von Doom? I think that's awesome. Because that really does showcase the insanity of having these different versions of characters. So yeah, I think that sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, no, so I'm just excited about where things go from here, because now finally, for me, speaking of Fantastic Four, the reason why I'm so excited about that is because for me, Fantastic Four is one of those big staples of Marvel history, and that if you don't have the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, and when things started off, they didn't have Spider-Man either. It's just that's why I always had that bit of separation from the MCU, because it's you've got to have these staples, these really important and popular staples of Marvel, and for me, a lot of those characters are what I consider Marvel. So to finally have them coming into the world, it just makes it so that I'm finally super hyped up for what's coming next. And yeah. So I guess that about wraps it up. Anything else?
No, I mean, I just, I really found this movie just to be such a thrilling, experience. And then it was not perfect. There were elements, we skated over some certain elements that we don't enjoy as much. For me, I did think that some of the sexual harassment humor went a little far for my personal taste. But that is just, I expect that with the Deadpool, he always kind of is going to ride that line a little bit more. There were just a couple of jokes that I thought it's not going to be to my taste to have that in the movie. But it didn't ruin the overall experience, because ultimately this was a labor of love, and the story. I did not find it to be a cynical output. I found it to be a very sincere, engagement with these characters and these stories, that were as much as I like, as much affection as I have for them and for this larger universe. And really what I just wanted was for them to honor the spirit of that, and I feel like they did. So this movie is a success for me, whether or not it takes its place as one of my favorite MCU movies. I'm on the record as being a bigger fan of some of the Endgame era, pre-multiverse stuff than you are. Those are still, I would still have some of those movies above this one, but I just think as an overall enterprise, like, this movie could have gone so many different ways, and some of them would have not, worked nearly as well. The tone that they struck, I ultimately think, was the right tone. And I found that the creative heart at the center of it was something that I found very authentic, and that's why I consider this movie just, it deserves the success it's having, and I look forward to seeing where they go from here.
Yeah, I just wanted to like, I don't like to be like a box office guy, but I'm totally comfortable with this climbing as high as it can possibly go. I'd love to see that kind of success for it, just because I want them to like get the message also that like, there's a lot of X-Men fans out there, and fans of Marvel's past, and I think that's playing a big part in this movie's success too. So yeah. So I had something else I was going to say, but I don't quite. Oh, I know what I was going to say about, pre Endgame era. I'll give my props also to the first Iron Man movie, which I still think is like just one of the best comic book movies ever made. The latter two Captain America films, both Winter Soldier and Civil War, which I think are great. And there's other ones that I like as well, but those ones definitely stand out. So like, contrary to the running joke, like I actually, there's very few of the MCU movies that I haven't at least had a fun time watching. It's so I always say that it's not that I have like any kind of hatred for the MCU, but for a long time it was kind of more of an ambivalence. But there's still lots of the movies that I've enjoyed a lot, and so yeah, and we've kind of talked about a little while ago. I feel like we talked about the pluses of the original Thor movie as well. Which is a lot better, I think, than people give it credit for. And so yeah, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really excited to be in the era where the X-Men are have arrived, and so yeah, can't lie about that. But so I just will go ahead and wrap up. Again, we're going to be on vacation for a couple weeks, or well, we're going to be on hiatus for a couple weeks. I'll be on vacation. Sorry, Jared. But when we come back, our first stream will be about before midnight. So if you haven't seen that, the Before trilogy, check it out. I have enjoyed these movies a lot more than I was anticipating, especially the second one, which was just amazing. And I'm still exploring the possibility that I might order that Criterion box set. We'll see. I've been trying to save some money, so if it fits in the budget, coming up, then I might treat myself to that.
Yeah, and if you don't, I will, because I adore these movies, and I think that it's just, I'm very keen to see what you'll think of Before Midnight, because again, I love all three of these movies so much. I think that Before Midnight is, it is probably the best crafted of the three, even if it's, the one is probably the most challenging, but as the way it completes the story, I think it makes it an incredibly worthy part of this trilogy that I adore so very much. So, you know, I recommend you wait until like you're nice and rested before you jump in and revisit it, because the movie there are some scenes that will stress you, but I think you will ultimately find it very as I do.
Good. Yeah, only other thing I'll throw in before we sign off is I didn't show it off earlier, but I did get my special IMAX ticket for the movie, which was a nice, pleasant surprise when I went to go see it. So yeah, I wanted to show that off.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. And those of you who tuned in to watch, we had a little bit of a quiet chat this week, but that's okay. They had a great time talking about this movie, and I just can't wait to go see it again. Yeah, definitely one of my favorite MCU movies in a while, and yeah, it was just fun. So yeah, I guess that's it. We'll see you guys when we come back in a couple weeks, and hope you all have a great night. And if you're still here, go watch House of the Dragon, which is what we're going to be doing real soon here. I'm sad that we're at the end of the season, but I did avoid any spoilers from. I
from
understand there was a leak, but I've avoided all of it, so I'm very, very happy. Gonna get to enjoy it, regardless of how tonight's episode is. This has been one of my favorite, Game of Thrones related seasons. Yeah, ever. I think we're both agreed on that, Jared. It's been a pretty damn great season. Yep. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Love hanging with you guys, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Until then, I don't know. We don't really have a sign-off word for.
I mean, I feel like we should just leave it with what Deadpool himself would say, which is maximum effort.
There you go. Bye, guys.